This all went down at the Reloni Duchy Academy, way out west in the Empire. It's known as a backwater ivory tower, if you catch my drift. That's where Kiana Frelai, the Duke's daughter, had her lab. And one day, they came to arrest her. Her and everyone with the Frelai name. The girl was clueless why she was being grabbed, and she started laying into those soldiers, cursing them out. That's when they told her that her grandpa had committed treason against the crown. Skari Frelai was like a father to Kiana, since her own dad vanished under mysterious circumstances. She also had two reckless older brothers who were always up to something. And her younger cousin, Melissa, was so powerful, people practically called her a saint. Nobody in the family seemed capable of that kind of betrayal, so Kiana thought the whole arrest was totally bogus. Still, they didn't just grab her, they sentenced her to death. As they were dragging her away, she saw the dean in the hallway, talking to a knight. He was saying that if Kiana dies, Professor Frelai's patents would go straight to the academy, and that he only agreed to cooperate under those conditions. The whole treason thing blew up big. It was even in the papers. Kiana Frelai's a genius magic engineer, working with magical tools. This field's all about math and physics, and Kiana had a ton of patents. She'd been at the academy for 7 years, and the dean used to look out for her. But now she realized he sold her out for the cash, and she swore revenge. Even if she has to make a deal with the devil himself, she'll destroy him and his whole bloodline. She never imagined that at 23, right after becoming a professor, she'd suddenly be sentenced to death and shipped off to the Empire. Kiana was locked in an underground prison near the Imperial Palace. As she was taking in her awful situation, she heard a voice behind her. It was her cousin, who couldn't believe she'd been caught too. Still, Melissa, who had divine powers, was happy to see her cousin. Kiana started grilling her about why Grandpa was accused of treason. He'd never do anything like that, and Melissa also thought the accusation was bogus. The girl started to sob, but Kiana kept pushing her for answers. Melissa was accused of treason because she once turned down the prince. That prince is the type to hold a grudge and wanted to dish out the same treatment. Kiana glanced at Pyagi, the little bird, passed out cold from the recent magic. She couldn't believe Prince Heaton would do something like this to them. Like he thought. The Frelai family had been backing the crown prince lately. Just then, a guard's voice boomed, ordering them to take the criminals away. The girls panicked, especially Melissa, who wasn't ready to kick the bucket. She couldn't believe this was how it ended. Not with her divine power and all. Kiana noticed her cousin's eyes starting to roll around in a weird way, and Melissa was wailing about how she should have just joined a convent, 'cause then she might have lived. Kiana started shaking her cousin by the shoulders, begging her to keep it together. But she decided to try and go back in time, using divine power. Her plan was to go back a year, keep her memories, and immediately join a monastery. Kiana was trying to explain that going back wasn't possible when she saw a bright light. Her thoughts were just about not dying for nothing, and she started to feel like she was falling asleep. And the next thing she knew, she heard the junior professor waking her up. The girl saw herself at a desk, even though she'd just been in a prison cell. The assistant reminded her that she shouldn't be sleeping in the lab. This guy was a co-author on projects because he was related to the dean. And Kiana, completely stunned by what was happening, blurted something out without thinking. She told him he had no right to criticize her and threatened to rearrange his face if he didn't get lost. The guy wasn't looking for trouble and got out of the office quick. Kiana started looking around and noticed she was wearing a lab coat, the same one she wore when she was a junior professor, back in her school days. And she figured maybe she shouldn't have snapped at that dude like that. She saw today's newspaper on the floor, the one her colleague dropped. The girl reached for it, wanting to double-check something, and she was floored when she read an article about her cousin Melissa, who apparently applied to become a nun and dedicated her life to charity work. Then, checking the date, Kiana realized she'd gone back a year, just like her cousin wanted, and she still had all her memories. The girl realized her cousin had actually turned back time, using some kind of divine power to do it. First, she decided to send Melissa a letter straight to the monastery. She asked what would happen to the Frelai family after she left the estate, and in the meantime, she'd hide out here and make some plans for the future. A few days passed since then. The creature Melissa summoned, a Pyagi, brought Kiana the letter. The little bird, holding the envelope in its beak, started tapping on the window, but the girl didn't open it for a while. and Pyagi started getting worried. She could see through the glass that she looked like total garbage. Kiana looked more like a tormented ghost at that point, but she perked up when she saw the letter and started reading it right away. Melissa wrote that she appreciated her cousin's concern and believed there was a spark of good in her, even though everyone else thinks she's just some stuck-up, demon-spawned rich brat. And she confessed that she'd realized she needed to become a nun. She took it as a sign from above, so she decided to join a convent. Kiana found that weird, since Melissa only thought about that to keep from kicking the bucket. And now her cousin's planning on traveling with some other volunteers. As a goodbye, she sent Kiana a notarized deed transferring her property. Melissa's gift turned out to be that very same Pyagi bird. She doesn't need the summoned creature anymore, not since she's no longer a member of the Frele family. This family's known for the ability to summon their own unique creatures. Usually, this starts happening around the age of 8. These creatures have all kinds of abilities, but Kiana? Nothing. Even as she got older, she never managed to summon a damn thing. And now her cousin's giving her a summoned creature as she leaves the estate. But the little bird warned her that going back in time didn't exactly go smoothly. When Melissa did it, she ended up in contact with her cousin. And Pyagi, the summoned creature, was caught in between them. And for some reason, instead of Melissa, only Kiana and Pyagi kept their memories of the regression. The only thing Melissa had left was her desire to become a nun. So she bolted straight to the monastery, kicking up a fuss. But Pyagi wasn't about to tell her she'd gone back in time. Summoned beings swear loyalty only to a Frelai and nobody else. So they'd rather serve another Frelai, even if they're a real piece of work. The act of summoning itself is super important to them, and Kiana felt weird, because the summoned being recognized her as the Frelai, not just anyone. Then the little bird pointed at her notes and wanted to know what all that scribbling was about. It was a record of Kiana's agonizing over what to do next, because the Frelai family could end up in a desperate situation again. Kiana's got a plan to save the dukedom from this crisis, even though she's only got one lead. Right now, she's totally in the dark about what's going on in the Empire, because she's stuck out in the sticks. But now, a killer solution just landed right in her lap. Pyagi was with Melissa and can spill all the tea about what's happening in the Empire. The girl gave the bird some paper and asked it to lay everything out in 2 weeks. But it was like, no way, because it's exhausted and it'd have to write about years' worth of stuff. Because of that, Pyagi thought Kiana was a real hard ass. 3 hours later, the girl decided to check what the bird had written down. But it couldn't remember a lot of the details, and Kiana told it to try harder. Pyagi started whining. He had no idea Kiana was such a weirdo and a workaholic. But then, memories started flooding back to him. So he asked the girl to hold on a sec, because he'd found a way for summoned creatures to directly transmit memories to their master. The bird immediately perched on Kiana's head, sending memories that were supposed to come as visions. But they started hitting her in text format. It was more like reading a novel with Melissa as the main character, because Pyagi only saw and heard what was happening from Melissa's perspective. This kind of info transfer is possible because his connection with Kiana isn't perfect yet. And she also found out her cousin was kinda popular with the guys. Melissa was supposed to be engaged to Rodrigo, but she had all these dudes wrapped around her finger. Sometimes Kiana was remembered as the villain who almost screwed Melissa over. Guys promised to heal the wounds Kiana inflicted on her as a kid. They even wanted to challenge her to a duel, but she was long gone. It annoyed her, but figuring out what was going on in the Empire was the priority, especially the part where the dukedom was accused of treason and everything that led to the tragedy. Kiana was even thrown for a loop, not knowing whether to call it the past or the present. Everything had already been written down like a story, and she made a decision. She decided to call it the original, since she could reread it a bunch of times. And based on the original, she needed to stick to certain points. After thinking it over, Kiana realized she had to go back to the dukedom. She's the only one who knows what's coming, so she's got to take charge. No sooner did she get lost in thought than someone started banging on the door. A voice from behind the door announced that Dean was summoning Lady Kiana. Apparently, the introductory briefing is starting, and Kiana needs to give a speech. The girl sadly remembered how it went down last time. It's an academy welcome event for new students and their parents. The dean wants to reel in more students using Kiana, 'cause tuition ain't cheap, and that Dean values money more than he does any human being. The girl got an idea and promised she'd be right there. Before heading back to the duchy, she decided to teach that dean a lesson. The Reloni Academy auditorium was already packed. The dean welcomed the freshmen and their parents. He thanked them for coming and then got ready to introduce someone. He called her the pride of the academy, Professor Kiana Frelai. The girl greeted everyone and mentioned she was currently working on her doctorate. Then she explained that magical engineering is based on math and science, and she was about to talk a little about science, which the dean praised her for. He put his hand on her shoulder in a friendly way, but she immediately whacked him with her pointer and calmly continued about how science is connected to their everyday lives. Behind the podium, where no one could see, Kiana also kicked the dean in the knee. The sharp pain hit him so hard, he just dropped to the floor, totally confused. Kiana wasn't done yet. She poured some liquid from a test tube all over him, explaining it was gravity. Then she calmly asked the dean to help her out, saying the lecture was in full swing. Next thing you know, she slaps him upside the head, and it wasn't gentle. She gave him this sweet smile and explained it was the law of action and reaction. The students were totally digging this lecture, thought it was super engaging. And then Kiana grabbed the dean by the hair, saying that's how objects move. Turns out, his hair was just a wig, which she promptly chucked into the crowd. That wig went flying across the whole auditorium, and right out the window, past some seriously stunned academy staff. And Kiana explained to the students that this is called projectile motion. At the academy, they study all these laws and create magical tools, like, say, a magical adhesive that needs a special solvent to remove it. The girl squeezed a little of the glue from the tube onto a piece of paper and held it up to the dean, getting ready to stick it to his bald head. On the back of the sheet, she'd written, "Trash," and she slapped it right on his forehead. The dean started yelling and demanding someone bring him the solvent, but Kiana just left him like that and declared that attending the academy wasn't mandatory. And with that, she left the academy, even though she had grown fond of the place, and with a clear conscience, she hopped into the carriage headed for the Empire. Pyagi rode with her, wondering what the lady planned to do next. Politics were definitely out. She didn't have the connections or the cash. She considered just laying it all out for her family, telling them everything. But judging by the look on that bird's face, she knew it would sound totally insane. I mean, she can't exactly announce she's reliving her life, and that the prince is planning to screw over the Frele family. Besides, she doesn't even know why yet, and no one would buy that story anyway. And she already caused her family enough grief when she was a kid. She was a little hellraiser growing up, so now she needs to smooth things over. 'Cause a bad rep and a rough past are gonna come back to bite her. So, plan B. She decided to help the one guy who's Heaton's enemy. Who thinks the Freles are gonna back the crown prince? Now Kiana needs to figure out how to grab the reins, which means making the enemy of your enemy your ally. First, she'll reach out to him and the Freely family. Sometime later, in the Rafan Empire's capital, rumors reached the prince that Princess Kiana is heading back to the Empire. She even filed to revoke some patents, which has the Academy in total meltdown. Details were scarce, but it sounds like the Academy didn't see that coming. And considering Kiana's heading towards the capital, she's making a beeline for the Freele Duchy. People figured she was tired of doing research way out in the sticks. The prince was actually kinda stoked about the news. He'd finally get to see her after being apart for so damn long. The Frelai family estate is just outside the capital of the Talus Empire. Pyagi was hyped to finally see the estate. They were almost there. The little bird even tried to fly out the window for a better look, but Kiana grabbed him. She'd prepared a letter that Pyagi needed to deliver ASAP. The feathered dude wasn't thrilled, figuring he wasn't a servant and deserved a break. But the girl asked him again to secretly drop the message in the mailbox. Pyagi wasn't digging this mission, 'cause it would take about a week. Secret delivery. That's this summoned creature's special skill. One that lets you secretly deliver small items over short distances in about a week. Getting an assignment like that, Pyagi thought his mistress was cruel and heartless all over again. And he started whining about all the emotional damage she'd caused him. The girl told the bird not to blow things out of proportion, explaining that souls can't get bruised because they don't have any capillaries. Knowing it was pointless to argue, the bird just gave her a dirty look and wished that magical engineering would just crash and burn and disappear. And as Pyagi flew out the window, the coachman announced that they had arrived. The girl couldn't believe she was back in a place that held absolutely no good memories for her. Servants greeted her there, surprised that Lady Kiana had returned. "We got word right away. The dukedom's a mess after that assassination attempt." One of the maids tried to off the duke with a poisoned dagger, but she botched it. Now the servants are lining up to announce Kiana's arrival, but she shut that down. All she wants is to crash after that brutal trip. She just doesn't feel like facing Grandpa the second she gets back. But she needs to see him, warn him about what's coming, give him a heads up. Word of Kiana's return got to Scary Frele pretty quick, though. Her grandpa, head of the estate and a fencing master. The servant reported the lady went to rest and promised to visit the Duke tomorrow. The old man found it weird she showed up unannounced. All sorts of crazy theories started popping into his head as he tried to figure out why. Kiana used to lock herself in her room for ages and then take it out on Melissa when she came out. She was pulling away, becoming withdrawn, and Grandpa couldn't connect with her anymore. And when she left for the academy, she swore she'd never come back to the estate. Scary blamed himself because he'd been too harsh and kept thinking about how to get her back. He just couldn't understand why his granddaughter hated this place so much. Then Joshua laid out all the reasons why anyone would want to get the heck out of here. Hearing that, Scary realized this wasn't the kind of environment to raise kids in. Basically, all they had was money, power, prestige, and a fancy title. But now that Kiana's back, Grandpa figures she's changed her mind about things. The servant reported that the assassination attempt was under investigation, and the Duke ordered a good, strong maid assigned to Kiana. He himself planned to spend the evening in the conservatory, doing some thinking. That night, Kiana had a nightmare where she was being chased by voices. They were claiming she stole Melissa's summoned creature. She also dreamed of a young mother, crying and collapsing. Plus, Marquis Caesar offered a huge grant for research. Then the girl saw a noose hanging right in front of her face, and the dean's voice, droning that she couldn't leave that place, scared her stiff. Kiana jolted awake in bed, drenched in a cold sweat. And right away, she clocked the personal maid they'd assigned to her. The maid reported that the Duke was still asleep, and the rest of the family wasn't on the estate. Next, she showed the lady a stack of letters that had arrived from the academy last night, and when she offered breakfast, Kiana only asked for coffee. The maid was surprised that the lady was asking for coffee when she wasn't feeling well, but realizing the servant had been sent to keep an eye on her, she told her not to argue. Still, she understood that the maid was just doing her job, and promised not to ask for a different maid, seeing how worried she was getting. She even joked that the maid could brag about how she'd been spying on the family leadership. Then she asked for coffee again, and said she was heading out to Rhodeton Street after that. The maid got all flustered, but Kiana practically shoved her out the door. Still, she confirmed her plan, which sounds totally insane. She's actually going to visit her jerk of a second brother, Joshua. Before long, the maid had helped Kiana get ready, but she wasn't sure if the checkered ribbon was really the right look for her lady. Kiana's got a plan. It'll help her talk to Grandpa like family. And she wanted to start with something nice, to make up for all the crap. Scary's got a summoned creature, Howl. It absorbs and purifies poison. But for some reason, after Kiana left, Howl never showed up in the original story. He only showed up, totally messed up, when Grandpa and Melissa got arrested, who must have absorbed so much poison he couldn't even stand. Kiana had about 6 hours left before meeting Grandpa. That gives her time to head over to Rhodeton Street. She'd heard gossip there that Joshua was always rolling in the dough. Just the jewelry he wears could buy a mansion. His summoned creature was a snake with the power to sniff out cash. But nobody knew where his wealth came from, and everyone figured it was the family's dirty money, and that he was using that money to buy approval from everyone around him. Joshua noticed the Frele family carriage pull up all of a sudden. He thought it was Alex at first, but that dude wouldn't be caught dead in a carriage. But then I saw Kiana step out of the carriage, congratulating him on his newfound wealth. She even compared him to some nouveau riche dude just hoarding all his cash. Then she handed him a small package, a housewarming gift. It was a vase with a checkered pattern, which Joshua thought was totally tasteless. The girl didn't get offended, saying ignorance isn't a crime after all. Then she pulled a small but thick magazine out of her bag and chucked it right in the face of some guy standing nearby. The one who was talking about inferiority complexes and all that crap. The girl declared that wasn't the reason for her brother's lavish lifestyle. It's just his personal taste, And with that, she chased the gossips away. Her final order was to lay off the gossip about other people's lives. The guy, clutching his throbbing forehead, was surprised, but didn't argue. Kiana explained that she just couldn't stand the daytime drama. Plus, she hated seeing her brother's dirty laundry splashed across the magazine cover. Joshua just invited his sister, who he hadn't seen in 6 years, to come inside. She checked out his living room. Clearly, he'd dropped a ton of cash on it. Even the throw pillows looked like they cost a fortune. Kiana thought her brother hadn't changed, and talking to him always brought her good luck. Joshua started asking why she hadn't let him know she was back. She changed the subject to Lorelai, the magazine editor, who she thinks is a real piece of work. Leah, being a summoned being, can transform into a human. The gossip magazine was selling like crazy, and Joshua was raking it in. He had informants everywhere, so he knew about his sister's return right away. Nothing happens in the capital that this guy doesn't know about. The girl admitted she only had a couple of questions for him, then she'd be gone. She's curious about what he thinks when his summoned being is sick. Joshua would rather suffer himself, since they came into this world for their masters. And if someone could heal the being, Joshua would shower them with riches. Kiana wanted to heal Hao so her grandfather could fight Heaton, but then Joshua declared that no doctor specializes in the diseases of summoned beings. He got curious about why Kiana suddenly decided to help the family, but she didn't see anything suspicious about it, 'cause they're family and should help each other out. Joshua almost choked on his drink when he heard her say that. His sister would never have said something like that before. It was like she'd been replaced. He even started suspecting that Kiana's body was now inhabited by another soul. The girl looked surprised, but she understood his suspicions, so he asked her to tell him a secret that only the two of them knew, though they never actually had any secrets, because they weren't close like that. But she reminded him about those romance novels that only he reads. After that, Joshua sighed heavily and believed that it was his sister in front of him. Then Kiana started asking him what he knew about the Crown Prince. The guy got confused, not understanding why Kiana was so interested in him. Still, all he knows about the prince is what everyone else knows. 6 years ago, he and his entourage went hunting in the Edpa Mountains. He fell off a cliff there and vanished without a trace, and the emperor ended up getting sick. Prince Heaton took the throne, but the emperor was against it until the crown prince's fate was confirmed. That really was everything Joshua Freeline knew. Kiana asked him to let her know if he found out anything about the crown prince. Also, she's interested in the connections between Prince Heaton, the crown prince, and their family. That request just rubbed Joshua the wrong way. He figured meddling in royal affairs was just asking for trouble. Seemed like he genuinely cared about his sister. But she told him not to worry and to let her know if anything came up. Her brother wouldn't let it go, begging Kiana to stop getting involved in this stuff. Said it could seriously damage the reputation of the Duke's house. There's no telling how the head of the Frele family might react to all this. He had 2 sons, one of them being Kiana's father. The second son, Skari, fell for a commoner and split from the family. Kiana's mom also bailed, leaving only a note and running off in the middle of the night with a coachman. She took a tumble off a cliff trying to ditch some knights and died instantly. The girl's dad turned into a shell of his former self and went off to the northern duchy to fight monsters. And Kiana, who looked just like her mom, was the only one without a summoned beast. The psychological pressure on her was insane, but it wasn't just her. She and her brothers were all messed up in their own ways because of this whole situation. She just admitted that she genuinely congratulated Joshua on becoming independent. And she decided to confess what she'd been working on since she was a kid. It was a magical device that could change her eye color. She also wanted to figure out where she really came from. Joshua couldn't understand why she was even thinking about this stuff. But Kiana was always called a disgrace to the Frele family behind her back, even though she became a professor. So everything she went through wasn't for nothing. She remembered how messed up Joshua was back then because of his parents. The nanny was trying to calm him down, telling him it was a pretty common thing. And that's how he started digging into the scandals of the upper class. The magazine made him rich. From Kian's original story, she was able to piece together some of their backstory. The dude hated his dad for what he did to their mom. He didn't even think about the kids he was ditching. Joshua couldn't wrap his head around how parents of 3 kids could be so damn irresponsible. Back then, even his grandpa couldn't soothe his pain, and his grandpa and Alex didn't approve of his actions, thinking he was still hurting from old wounds. Kiana saw it differently. She recognized her brother's potential and talent. Even though it started with a messed-up past, he's still forging his own path. That's why Kiana's gonna back his gossip rag. Her admission came off a little strong. She could tell by the look on his face, so she added that it's okay if he acts like a rebellious teenager. Besides, he's developed a taste for the finer things in life. After that, a couple of minutes of silence hung between them. Then Kiana tossed him back the couch cushion and got ready to leave. Joshua noticed she really liked that cushion and told her to keep it, especially since she gave him that vase, so he figured he'd return the favor. And he also told his sister not to think she was a disgrace to the Frele family. He figured he was the screw-up, because he gave him way more trouble than she ever did. Kiana was so touched. Her heart skipped a beat, but in a good way. Joshua told her to chill out and use her damn head for once. Saying goodbye to her brother, she told him to take care of himself and remember what she asked. He just gave her a hard look as she walked away. But then he finally told her to leave all the imperial crap to Grandpa. 'Cause the Emperor's about to kick the bucket, and Prince Heaton's gonna take the throne. That's just how it is. And there hasn't been a peep about the missing prince in the last 6 years. But then Joshua noticed how skinny his sister's arms were and started to freak out. Even her complexion looked super pale to him, and he figured the academy wasn't feeding her right. The girl couldn't figure out why he was suddenly getting all worked up about it now. I mean, in 6 years, he hadn't even bothered to reach out once. Then she slammed the door shut and drove off, and Joshua just stood there, watching her go. He didn't get what she was saying, because he'd been sending her letters every single month. Now, it seemed weird to him that his sister hadn't mentioned them at all. He thought Kiana was just blowing him off, not even inviting him to her graduation showcase. Realizing something was definitely off, Joshua decided to tail his sister. He was determined to have a real heart-to-heart with her this time. Kiana was riding with the maid, and she noticed they were taking a different route. The lady wanted to swing by the store to pick up a few essentials. The royal family hadn't shown her any interest before, so she figured they didn't care. They haven't seen each other in 6 years. Kiana even invited them to her graduation, but they blew her off. And if we leave everything up to Grandpa, the whole family's gonna end up in deep trouble again. When she was 13, Melissa, who was the same age, came to live with them. After her parents died, Grandpa took in the girl from a distant branch of the family, but she could summon a being and was hoping to see Kiana do the same. Melissa wanted to get close to her sister and to her creature, which never showed up. Kiana decided her cousin stole her Pyagi, so she made her life miserable. And by the time they both turned 16, one night, Kiana went after Melissa with a knife and got busted. Everyone thought she'd gone too far, but the girl had a plan. Kiana had already cooked up a magic gizmo that could change eye color, but she wasn't making it for herself, so she wouldn't become a laughingstock. Melissa was her target from the jump. She was going to switch up her eye color, so nobody would ever say she was a better fit to be Lady Frelai. It needed the user's blood to work, which is why Kiana shanked her cousin. But Grandpa thought she'd crossed a line and really chewed her out for it. Still, Kiana realized then that if things kept going the way they were, she'd be stuck in a trap of misery, all because of something she couldn't have. Her move was dumb. Changing Melissa's eyes won't fix anything. And Kiana asked Grandpa to send her to the academy in the Duchy of Reloni. She decided to bury the artifact without ever using it. But since she dedicated her childhood to making it, tossing it would be a waste. So, the girl decided to figure out how to get rid of it later. It took her several days to travel to Reloni, far to the west of the empire. On the way, she needed to use the restroom and asked them to stop the carriage. Even though the knight told her not to go far, Kiana had to get some distance. She stopped in the thick foliage of some bushes in a wooded area, and suddenly, she spotted someone there, wearing a long robe. Seeing a weird stranger in the woods kind of freaked her out. Though, judging by his looks, he seemed like just a little kid. Kiana noticed his fancy clothes and figured he was some kind of noble. Then, he asked her to stay away and pretend she hadn't even seen him. The girl was clueless who he was and why he was so worried about it. And all he did was tell her again to mind her own business. Kiana didn't want to argue, but she also didn't want to leave him out there alone. Still, she told him to take care and headed off in the other direction. She booked it out of there so fast, it even struck the boy as odd. For a while, he watched her figure disappear into the bushes. But then Kiana spun around and came back to him. The kid asked her why, and you could even hear a little excitement in his voice. She just told him to hang tight, promising she'd be gone soon. And she confessed she had this magical thing she was gonna ditch. Then she pulled out the artifact and held it out to him, figuring he needed it more. Worst case, he could pawn it and make some decent cash. Kiana didn't admit she was responsible for what happened and claimed it was the work of someone else who's no longer around. She even told him how to use the thing, but you only get one shot. The kid was totally confused why she was giving him something so valuable, and she admitted she was nervous about leaving him alone in the woods. That's why I gave him the gift, to ease my own conscience a little. It was a useful tool for the kid, and he thanked Kiana for it, and she felt this aura of trustworthiness coming from him. Then she asked him how he even ended up here in the first place, and the kid explained that everyone had screwed him over, but now he was out for revenge. Suddenly, it struck Kiana as weird that he was being so open with her. But either way, she decided to leave him be, telling him again to be careful. As a final thing, the kid promised that after a long time, when he could totally disappear, he'd let her know if he was alive or dead. He also told her to set up a secret email address so they could keep in touch. That seemed weird to her too, but she promised to think about it. Then the kid gave her his secret mailbox number, and they said their goodbyes. That was their last meeting, but Kiana was super rushed at the time. And then she heard the news that the crown prince had perished after a fall. The girl suddenly realized she'd met the crown prince before. He had silver hair, blue eyes, and he was already a master swordsman. Crown Prince Talus was always surrounded by people who adored him. He was showered with attention, and nobles constantly requested audiences with him. And if it weren't for his childhood chubbiness, he'd be a spitting image of the emperor. But since Kiana's got a gloomy personality, she avoided those kinds of dazzling people. She thought they wouldn't get along, but the kid in the forest seemed like a freaking prince. She set up that secret mailbox, but never even used the damn thing. And the crown prince in the past, he pulled off some ruthless payback without ever getting his hands dirty. Kiana's plan was to help him speed up his revenge so he could take down Heaton for good. So when she got to the capital, she had Pyagi drop a letter in his mailbox. But it's gonna be a while before Pyagi gets back. And then everyone's gonna believe that Kiana snatched that creature right from Melissa. I mean, she used to bully her cousin, thinking it was hers in the first place. Now she's got to figure out how to tell her family about the gift from her cousin. While she was thinking all this over, they pulled up to the store she needed. Meanwhile, this one dude was totally stressing about what to wear. His servant didn't get why he was trying so hard, since he and the princess were just using each other. But the guy wanted to look good, so she wouldn't bail on him early. Then, he told his servant to stop overthinking it and just help him with the clothes. And when everything was ready, he headed out to meet that certain someone. Kiana walked into Talus General Store, which had everything you could imagine, from emergency medical supplies to, enhancements. The girl told the maid to grab a little of everything and take it to the carriage. She was thinking that her grandpa should be awake by now, and after everything that happened, she felt awkward facing him. Whenever she was around him, she always wondered if she really was his granddaughter. Either way, she was determined to prove what she was capable of. Hell, she'd earned some respect back in the academy. Suddenly, the shop door swung open, and she saw this seriously good-looking dude. He was decked out in expensive clothes, but he was trying to play it cool, like he was no big deal. Kiana was positive there weren't guys like that in the capital 6 years ago. This guy walked right past her, leaving this awesome scent trail behind him. His moves were smooth and classy, but he seemed totally normal. But then someone else caught her eye, and she turned around. Standing there was a dude with a squid for a head. Said he was from the perverse estate. He's wondering why she didn't come by, and Kiana's just tripping out that a squid can talk. And then it hits her. It's Rodrigo Purvis, the dude she used to chase after when she was a kid. Apologizing, she explains she's still in dark adaptation mode. Then, realizing that's not exactly common knowledge, she tries to clarify. It's like when your eyes need time to adjust going from bright light to total darkness. Her vision's finally adjusting, and she can see his actual head now. The guy figures she's still holding a grudge about those rumors about him marrying Melissa. I mean, she's not even giving him a proper hello. Then he explains that those talks were just messing around, nothing serious. Kiana dipped to the academy out of nowhere anyway, so he asks her to just forget about it. And then this girl asks him to calculate the derivative of a function. But he was totally lost, and Kiana just flat out said they were way too different. Next thing you know, she's firing off more science questions, and he's still clueless. Then she decided to lay off him and just gave him a polite, "Hello." Then she threw shade, saying Rodrigo should have become a top chef, since he'd been stirring things up between her and Melissa since they were kids. The guy was speechless, and the tension in the air was getting thick enough to cut with a knife. And Kiana really twisted the knife, saying Rodrigo only wanted to marry Frelai, to one-up his older brother. Then she told him to focus on working on his, personal magnetism. I mean, Melissa didn't run off to a convent right before the engagement for nothing, right? Like she'd rather serve the downtrodden than live with Rodrigo. Her voice just kept getting louder and more grating. Even the customers started clearing out of the store to avoid the fallout. That's when the shopkeeper called out to Keanu, asking her to take it outside. Said it was bad for business, and the girl apologized for causing a scene. Rodrigo realized she was still as reckless as ever. He told her she'd been gone so long, she'd forgotten her place. Grabbing her arm, the Duke declared she wasn't getting away from him this time. Then she remembered chasing after him because of his red eyes, like the Frelai family. Back then, she was just obsessed with those eyes, and Rodrigo was a decent option. Now he's convinced she'd do anything for him, just to see him smile. But then Kiana drops the bomb that she's always been into Alex, and she flips the script, saying Rodrigo's chasing after her now because she's from Frelai, and that he's ready to marry her, even with her history. The Duke's face went all goofy, but he didn't deny what she said. Then, he claimed the Frelai family would be happy to pawn off a troublemaker like her on anyone. That surprised Kiana, since she's about to become the family's golden girl. But Rodrigo, with a nasty smirk, told her not to get her hopes up. At that point, Kiana decided to end this pointless argument and just walk away. When suddenly, that handsome rich dude stepped up and declared that Lady Frelai wasn't lying. The girl remembered seeing this total hottie just recently. He stepped forward, calling Rodrigo out for not answering straight. This knight in shining armor saw how the Duke's son was acting. He grabbed the hand Rodrigo was using to hold the girl and squeezed tight. He declared that this guy was the one looking like a villain here. Their eyes locked, and Prince Rodrigo saw a warning in the other guy's eyes. Kiana coughed pointedly, and they both turned their attention to her. Then the hottie confessed he'd been looking for her and asked for some of her time. He had that kind of face that could get him anything he wanted. But Kiana valued her time too much, so she turned him down. One second this dude was Mr. Confidence. The next he felt totally dumped and blindsided. He felt like crap and just had to bail out of that store. Outside, Ranyak, his manservant, noticed he was bummed about getting the cold shoulder from the lady. He told him not to sweat it, saying she probably had her reasons. Then he suggested they try to meet up again, like on business or something. But the boss wasn't feeling anything right then, and told the servant to just be quiet. Soon after, Lady Kiana got back to the Frelai estate, but she was seriously bummed out after that little encounter. Her maid trailed behind, asking if she wanted something to eat since she skipped lunch. The girl told her to lay off and ordered her to take the stuff inside. Plus, she had juice at Joshua's place, even though it was just juice. And now, she was getting annoyed that this mansion was way too huge. But she noticed the maid didn't seem tired at all and complimented her stamina. Then she blurted out that the maid would get a bonus if she brought coffee on time. After that, Kiana headed to the estate's conservatory. At the entrance, the maid warned her that she might need the Duke's permission, because it's a restricted area and no one's been in there for years. Kiana told her to keep the commentary to herself and kept going. Inside, she saw a massive bird peacefully sleeping in a nest. It was Duke Scary Frey's summoned creature, Howl. This dude thought she just wandered in here by accident and told her to scram. In Kiana's memories, this creature was soaring proudly above the mansion. Back then, she was around 6 years old, desperately trying to meet something like it. At that time, Kiana believed her creature would definitely be a bird. But now, looking at Ho, she actually felt a little sick. Still, she called the bird out, saying it had no right to tell Lady Frelai to leave. She even promised to fix the creature up, as long as it cooperated. Besides, she's not one of those doctors who can't heal summoned creatures. Then the girl turned sharply to the maid, which startled her a bit. and she asked her to make sure nobody came in here for the next 2 hours. So Duke Scary found out the maid who tried to off him took her own life, and that Kiana bounced from the estate this morning. The old man figured his granddaughter would come running to see him right away. But now he's thinking the estate's still a total hellhole for her. I mean, it's not just her. All the grandkids are desperate to get the heck out of here. The maid gave the Duke a sympathetic look, but kept her mouth shut. Things haven't been peaceful around the estate for a long time. Even Joshua split. He was raging, saying he'd never set foot in this house again. Those words burned into Scary's memory and really stung. The maid understood how the Duke felt. She's got kids and grandkids herself. And she assured me that now's a good chance to patch things up with Kiana. Scary always used to expect his grandkids to change their tune, but he never thought about changing himself, and now he's decided to give it a shot. Just then, a servant burst into the office, saying they had an emergency. He announced that Master Joshua had just arrived at the estate. The news was a shock, and the Duke figured his grandson had finally lost it. After all, when he left, he said he'd only come back if he was completely bonkers. Still, he quickly threw on his jacket and hurried off to meet his grandson. Before long, he was in the living room, where Joshua was waiting for him. They both just stared at each other with a kind of disdain at first. Then the old man wanted to know why his grandson had decided to show his face around here again, after he'd pretty much broadcast the Freelay's shame to the entire capital. Scary thought he was a terrible grandson, one who didn't even consider his grandfather's feelings. He went on a long, angry rant, but that was just his way of showing he cared. Joshua explained that he came back because Kiana was acting weird. Plus, he was worried about how thin and pale she'd become. Their shouting even spooked the butler, who thought they'd both lost their minds. And then he reported that Lady Kiana had gone to the conservatory. Hearing that, Duke Scary was immediately stunned, not knowing what to think, because his summoned creature, Howl, is there. And the old man got worried. He booked it over there right away, but his grandson kept telling him to chill out on the way. But there was no way he could stay calm when it came to his familiar. The kid got how he felt. He'd do the same thing, but he needed him to keep it together. The Duke stopped dead for a sec, giving his grandson a real nasty look. Then he took off running again towards the greenhouse, freaking out about the creature. Kiana's maid met him at the entrance and told him not to go in, because the lady ordered no one to be let in for 2 hours. The Duke blew his top, thinking the maid was way out of line, and ordered her to get out of his way. But she stood her ground, because the lady left her there as a guard. Joshua was surprised his sister hadn't smacked the maid yet. Every word Kiana said felt like a punch, and the maid didn't argue. But she took the lady's words as constructive criticism, and it made her think about herself. Plus, she caught a hint of kindness in what was said. Joshua remembered noticing the same thing when his sister called him out for living large. And the old Duke got the feeling that maybe all hope wasn't lost after all. Then the maid chimed in, saying she'd noticed the lady was pretty sharp. So she decided that from then on, she'd trust her completely. She even asked everyone else to put their faith in Kiana, like the academy genius she is. Suddenly, Scary realized he'd never really trusted his granddaughter. And Joshua noticed he hadn't trusted any of them either, even though he cared about them. Scar's excuse was always that they were troubled kids, and he just couldn't trust them, even though he bent over backwards, trying to keep the family business in one piece. The Duke's maid was standing behind them, worried this would blow up into a full-on brawl. So, trying to distract them, she faked like she was feeling faint. It worked! The guys shut up and turned their attention to her. But then they heard Kiana yelling at the patient to just chill out. The bird was just stoked that its body could move with some serious power again. And that's when everyone saw the doors to the greenhouse swing wide open. Inside, a huge bird was soaring around the whole place, looking totally majestic. Kiana, meanwhile, was buried in a stack of papers, scribbling away. How, that summoned creature, looked chipper and satisfied. And while the lady was locked in on her research, Scary approached her, speechless with surprise, followed by the whole entourage. Without even looking up, the girl told them to hang on a sec, because she was super focused, and you just can't interrupt her at times like these. Scary, Joshua, and the other servants froze in place, waiting to see what would happen next. Then, just a few seconds later, Kiana snapped out of it, and immediately chewed out the maid for letting people in here. The maid started making excuses, saying she did everything she could, and then immediately started praising the lady's work. But the lady just started nagging the maid again about taking too long to bring the coffee. But then Hao leaned over her, thanking her for healing him up. He thought he was going to be stuck helpless, but now he can get back to helping Scary. The girl just told him to take it easy, 'cause the poison's still working its way out. Then the Duke walked over, not really sure how to show his gratitude. Besides, this was the first time they'd seen each other since Kiana took off. When she was a kid, she always felt kind of small around her grandpa. And after that dressing down about Melissa, she feels even weirder looking him in the eye. Kiana didn't hear anything back at the academy and figured that was just how it was gonna be, 'cause she still thought she wasn't Scary's real granddaughter. But even if she isn't blood, she still got the right to stand tall in front of him. And she declared that this wasn't about medicine, but about the power of science and magic. She'd developed a magical artifact, but Joshua asked her not to get into the nitty-gritty, because that kind of stuff always bores people, so Kiana explained the healing process in simple terms. And this artifact was complicated for everyone else, but not for Kiana. She was able to calculate the constantly changing concentration of poison in Hao. After all, she was a talented girl, capable of doing a lot, but she just couldn't summon her familiar, no matter how hard she tried. And then Duke Scary thanked his granddaughter in a quiet voice, because she saved Hao, even though the old man hadn't done a damn thing for her. But Kiana suddenly declared that her grandfather had done a great deal for her. I mean, he gave her a monthly allowance just for being Freelai. The old man really did try to be generous, but kept it within reason. Now he was wondering why Kiana came back so suddenly. But this is her home. Even though they practically kicked her out that time she was waving a knife around. She could have been a professor at the academy, but she changed her mind. Still, Grandpa was happy she managed to get an education at least. He thought grad school was a waste of time though, and that bummed Kiana out. Joshua noticed how much venom was in Hao, and knew that no one could survive that. He was curious how Kiana managed to extract such a potent toxin. And the bird rushed to Scary, happy that he was almost healed. The Duke, beaming, hugged his familiar and thanked his granddaughter. Kiana confessed she'd been passing by yesterday and just stumbled upon Howl. She felt bad for him, so she figured she'd try to nurse him back to health, especially since that summoned creature means so damn much to her grandpa. For a few moments, everyone quietly celebrated the bird's recovery. And then Joshua wondered aloud why there was so much coffee around. The girl just explained that people always chug a ton of it when they're working. Then the maid, not even trying to hide that she was a spy, handed the Duke a report. The old man started reading intently, and Joshua leaned in to take a look too. Suddenly, the brother, looking baffled, asked his sister to explain something. He was worried she barely ate, and she admitted she'd only had cookies and juice. Joshua started getting concerned that she'd been eating just as poorly back at the academy. She argued, but confessed she'd been working like crazy on her dissertation. She had to spend up to 16 hours in the lab. She cut back on meals because big meals made her sleepy. Now, both the old man and his familiar were worried about her condition. And Kiana added that she couldn't eat or sleep properly while she was working. She was constantly chugging energy drinks, coffee, and popping stomach pills. Now it's clear why the lady's so thin. She's been living like this for 6 years. But she loved magical engineering, and everyone loved her research. That didn't sit right with the Duke. He figured everyone else didn't give a damn about her. The girl felt a wave of disapproval and worry crashing down on her. Kiana explained she was a one-woman show, so taking a break was out of the question. But even so, the dean and the professors were always trying to keep her close. She wanted to prove she deserved to be there, so she didn't have a choice. To become a professor, she had to meet the publication quota. But no matter how brilliant a student she was still an outsider. Duke Scary suddenly realized he'd missed something important about his granddaughter. He didn't want her to end up in this situation, but he hadn't been watching closely enough. And it pissed him off that the academy dared to treat her like that. That's when Joshua got confused. Why would his sister sacrifice herself for some academy? I mean, she hadn't contacted them for 6 whole years, not even for her graduation. He couldn't figure out why Kiana wouldn't see her family for this, and he admitted they sent her letters all the time, but only got vague replies every now and then. That's when Kiana realized something was seriously messed up with the letters, because she did reply to their letters, and even invited them to her graduation. It started dawning on everyone that someone was intercepting their mail on purpose, but it wasn't clear yet who would do that or why. Turns out, Hao was behind it all, hoping they'd work out their family issues themselves. Soon after, a servant brought in all the letters they'd exchanged with the academy. Kiana found her school life described in what she was reading, and there was also a request that she not attend her own graduation. She remembered how the professors told her to forget about her family and focus on her research, praising her talents. Now Joshua understood everything and thought those people were total creeps who destroyed their family. But then Hao added that the family was already falling apart. Nobody just wanted to admit it. That was actually true, but the Dukes just ignored it. And Joshua started yelling that the academy was going to pay for this. The old man agreed and decided to send Alex to take care of them. Kiana got worried. She felt bad for the academy, where she'd accomplished so much. But then she noticed her brother giving her a disapproving look, and she asked him to forget her momentary pity, saying it wasn't like her at all. Joshua then proudly declared that he was done with that academy for good. He was only glad that his brother Alex, who he thinks is totally off the rails, was far away. 'Cause that guy promised to shave Joshua's head if he even set foot in the house. Joshua just asked his sister to wait until their brother got everything sorted out. She started begging Grandpa to make sure Alex didn't hurt the students, since they were innocent, and also not to tear down the system, because there was still work to be done on it. The old man promised they'd only go after the higher-ups, and just then, Pyagi came back. Duke Skari and Joshua were weirded out to see that the creature had landed on Kiana's head, and she was happy he was back early, even though it was a first. When he was with Melissa, these errands always took about a week, and Kiana explained that her sister gave her Pyagi because she joined a convent. She even said she didn't want him, and suddenly Pyagi got upset, because she used to try and take him. Now he thought of her as even more of a cold-hearted woman and flew off. After that, a moment of silence fell between them. Then Duke Skari calmly suggested his granddaughter go after the bird, and advised her to comfort him after hurting him with thoughtless words. After all, summoned creatures are very emotional and dependent on their masters. He also asked her not to get hung up on the idea that they're just following orders. He realized that Keanu cared about his opinion on the summoned creature. Then he reminded her that the Frelai estate wasn't some academy, so she shouldn't be skipping meals, and he forbade her from drinking any weird potions. He wished her well, then told her to go get the little bird. The girl felt a little ashamed. It was the first time he'd given her advice about a familiar, and to show her gratitude, she promised to find and comfort the fledgling. She also decided to break him of his whining habit, since she was now his true master. On the way, she wondered if Pyagi had managed to deliver the letter so quickly. Meanwhile, in the imperial palace of Tylus, in Prince Hyten's study, a servant suddenly burst in on His Highness, completely freaking out. The prince figured they were getting ready for guests, because the emperor was sick. But Rodrigo asked him to hear him out about Kiana Frelai. He claimed she'd changed a lot since she used to chase after him. Now he's asking the prince to put some pressure on the duke so he can marry the princess. He thought the Frelai lady would be the best choice for his marriage. Rodrigo even reminded the prince of everything he'd done for him and asked for his help. Heaton reminded him that he wasn't the crown prince and didn't have that kind of power. He thought his brother was still alive, but Rodrigo said he was the one who pushed him off the cliff. The emperor's been bedridden with illness for 7 years now, and the third empress, Dolores, has been in seclusion since the prince disappeared. The late 5th Empress Salette's daughter isn't a threat to the succession, which means Heaton's got a real shot at becoming the next emperor. Guys his age with blue eyes? They've already taken care of him. Besides, blue eyes are super rare, so Heaton wasn't sweating it too much. Rodrigo was handling that, and the prince agreed to help him with Kiana. He promised to write a letter to the duke for Rodrigo to take with him, but he was pissed that his assistant brought up that whole thing again and threatened to deal with him like he did with Frelai. Meanwhile, Kiana went to Pyagi's room, and he was sulking like a little kid. He was whining about how he'd be in a world of hurt if it wasn't for Frelai's family, just like Lady Kiana felt when she went to the academy. The girl lay down next to the little bird on the bed and told him to stop sniveling. Even she wasn't sure if she should even be here right now. After all, the original story didn't have any scenes of the family even thinking about her while she was gone. Just then, Kiana noticed that Pyagi was just faking his tears, but she didn't say anything. and he announced that they weren't just not thinking about her, they barely even talked to each other at all. This whole place was a mess from the start, and Kiana couldn't argue with that. She suddenly wondered if this little chick missed Melissa, and if he was holding a grudge against her for ditching him and running off to the convent. Pyagi wasn't mad, because Kiana was trying to save the family, and he was happy to help, while Melissa's out there trying to save all the poor people in the world with those other volunteers. Melissa's memories were overflowing with love and kindness. She always smiled at everyone, and even the grumpiest family members always welcomed her. Pyagi was now expecting to be exploited by Kiana, but he felt invigorated. It became easier for him to deliver items, and he's getting it done faster. Kiana was pleased that her pep talk worked, and the little bird forgot what he was sulking about. But she realized she could now train Pyagi to carry heavier stuff. Plus, she can train him to be even more efficient. Pyagi was also happy that Kiana didn't run off like Melissa and is standing strong. After all, she's faced a lot of challenges here, but she's hanging in there. The girl just explained how it works using scientific terms. Pia wished, yet again, that magical engineering would just freaking fail already. First thing in the morning, a servant girl barges in, saying the Duke sent an offer. Still half asleep, all she wanted to know was if Prince Heaton's opinion was even considered. I mean, the only family above the Freelays is the freaking Imperial family. Kiana didn't expect Rodrigo to move so fast. In the original story, he pulled this crap with Melissa. But the prince wasn't happy about someone trying to steal his buddy's girl. And right now, Heaton doesn't even know what Kiana looks like. So he signed the order without a second thought. Kiana can only refuse the order by claiming she's already engaged. Though, if she does that, the Imperial family will try to tear them apart. But Kiana doesn't have a man, and if Grandpa doesn't approve, it's all for nothing. So the girl still doesn't want to marry Rodrigo, but she decided to apologize for being so harsh with him yesterday. That's why she told the maid to hurry up and get her ready for the meeting. Kiana decided to take this issue straight to Grandpa Scary. Joshua found out about Rodrigo's proposal, and he was not happy. More like furious, thinking the Duke's son was a complete nutjob. Even so, he'd already sent Duke Frele a letter, demanding they seal the deal with a marriage. Joshua, worried about his sister, immediately dove into his closet to pick out an outfit. But no matter what he chose, nothing seemed right for the occasion. And as much as he didn't want to, he's gonna have to meet his future brother-in-law. His assistant even got worried seeing how fast he was getting ready. Joshua needed to get to the Duke's estate ASAP. Word was, the Freelays had marriage problems. Alex, for example, got dumped on day 2. Melissa joined a convent, so marriage is a no-go. That leaves Kiana, who's got a rep for being a real handful. So Rodrigo should be grateful he's even in the running. But the way he and Prince Heaton were acting was seriously grating on Joshua's nerves. He couldn't shake the memory of a family torn apart by someone who just bailed, like what happened with his parents, and he didn't want that for his sister. That's why he was already plotting how to sabotage this marriage. Meanwhile, Kiana went to her grandpa and declared she wasn't interested in getting hitched, and that she has a reason even a prince can't just brush aside. Seeing Gramps was getting all worked up, she promised she'd thought it through. But he explained she doesn't need some big reason to ask for something. She could just say she doesn't want to marry that jerk, plain and simple. Scary also told his granddaughter from now on, just say what you want, straight up. He wouldn't just sit back and let the engagement happen just because Kiana didn't become a nun. Not like Melissa, who'd be causing a ruckus all over the kingdom. Finally, the old man told Kiana to just ignore that letter, because even her getting hitched isn't enough to keep our friendly ties with the royal family. Scary finally noticed Joshua showed up too, but his business kinda took care of itself. After that, the guy figured he'd heard enough and decided to bounce. But when he got to the hallway, he couldn't find a single servant. They'd all vanished. So he started whining that no one was around to see him off, like, "Hello, he's royalty." Just as his complaining hit peak volume, Kiana yanked the door open. Joshua assumed she was finally gonna do the right thing and escort him out. But the girl just told him to shut his trap and announced she was heading to practice. Joshua took her practice as her way of walking her brother to the carriage. And on the way, he even teased her to breathe evenly and keep a steady pace. Before long, Joshua was all settled in the carriage with his pet snake. He was never without the thing, but Kiana didn't seem to give a damn. What was bugging him right now was that all the servants were staring at him. It's 'cause of his yelling. But even with that, Kiana figured she could be friends with him. She also thought that if the whole family had stuck together, her life would have turned out differently. That's why she's got to put in the work to cooperate with them. And she reminded her brother about asking around about the crown prince. Joshua was quiet for a sec, then promised he'd do everything he could. What was also eating at him and Kiana was how Hao got hurt and when he was poisoned. But Grandpa ain't likely to tell him anything about it. She asked her brother to find out when Hao first started getting weak, and also to find someone for her in the capital, which he can totally handle. That's Marquis Caesar Levine. And hearing that name, Joshua was pissed. He knew him as a real piece of work and didn't get why Kiana needed him. Meanwhile, back at the Marquis's estate, Caesar was getting ready to take a stroll through the capital. His assistant was a little surprised, but figured it was urgent, even though the Marquis insisted it would be strictly business. Still, the assistant thought he was pushing things a little too far. But the Marquis was going to do both things anyway. He'd already planned it all out. Now it was just a matter of time, nothing more. Before all this, Caesar Levine had donated a boatload of cash for research. It was like he was targeting Kiana specifically, because she's a top professor in magical tool development. So, she's thinking of offering him a deal. A fake relationship. After all, he's generally not interested in women, and especially not Melissa. Kiana didn't know what he looked like yet, but she figured he was the best option. She'd heard the previous Marquis had passed away at 60, and Joshua knows that during the attack on Levine's territory, someone saved the Marquis's life. He also wiped out all the enemies and demoted them to the ranks, and the Marquis adopted this young guy. Kiana was surprised he was spending money like a real baller, even though he only moved to the capital a year ago. But nobody knows why he came, because he's not exactly a social butterfly. Then Kiana got curious about how Joshua knew Caesar was such a pain in the butt. Turns out, he's got this refined look, even though he doesn't wear designer clothes, and that really gets under Joshua's skin. This girl realized Caesar was hot, but something about him was just off. Either way, she told them to find him and let her know ASAP. All the while, she was trying to figure out how to calm her brother down so he wouldn't worry his head off about her. Kiana wanted to tell him to back off a little, stay out of her business, but Joshua's carriage was already pulling away. Later, Kiana was fuming because the maid wouldn't let her have any energy drinks, just healthy food. And the coffee she brings is like barely a drop in the bucket. But that's what Dr. Kalon recommended, since he'd been looking after Kiana since she was a kid. Then the maid handed the lady a letter from Lord Joshua. He wrote that he'd found Marquis Caesar Levine, and that he was currently hanging out in some unsavory establishment. My brother also told Keanu to steer clear of shady spots and meet the Marquis later. But instead, she started racking her brain, trying to remember where that clubhouse was. Then, quick as a flash, she scribbled out a letter and started getting ready. She asked the maid to mail the envelope and then come with her. And she also told her to doll her up real nice, 'cause she was headed to a den of iniquity. The Marquis and his assistant were glumly killing time at the clubhouse. They were wearing masks to hide their identities and hashing out the plan. From a distance, Caesar spotted the guy he'd been tracking at one of the tables. It's Orcasides, a former imperial knight and the prince's fencing instructor. He was also part of that ill-fated trip when the crown prince went missing. The Marquis was surprised that Orca, being broke, was hanging out in a place like this. Just then, a girl with long pink hair walked right past them. Under that mask, it was Kiana, and her maid was right on her heels. The Marquis's assistant recognized Lady Kiana and was totally blown away. Then they saw her playing blackjack at a private table. The goal of the game is to get a total score as close to 21 as possible, and after just one game, they handed her a mountain of chips. The other players at the table were shocked she was betting so much right off the bat. Anyway, the game went on, and even the people at the next table started noticing Kiana. Piagi was with her, but he was pretending to be a doll to avoid any awkward questions. The Marquis's assistant thought she was nuts, like she didn't know a thing about cards. And then one of the players decided to be the first to lay his cards down. But the girl had exactly 20 points, and she won. Kiana looked around at everyone and just smirked mysteriously. Then she asked the maid to collect the chips and got ready to leave. But then Orca slammed his hand on the table, freaking out, and accused her of cheating. He couldn't believe some girl could suddenly win like that. Kiana glared at him. She seriously wanted to smack him upside the head, but she just smiled and said she could barely hear him over the sound of her chips clinking. And the loser started yelling about how important he really was. He grabbed her wrist, but she was clearly trying to start something. She believed the right guy would show up because of it. Then this young dude stepped in, quickly shutting down Sita's by crushing his hand. He introduced himself as the club owner and promised to sort things out. Usually, the owner only pops up when there's a real problem. Now he's claiming he didn't see any cheating from the lady and that she just got lucky. The gambling house took a big hit because of it, but the owner gets it. Suddenly, Piaggi snapped out of it and lunged at the guy. He ripped off the mask covering his whole face. This guy looked like Joshua, so Kiana gave the bird the signal. But now you could see the face was different, and that blonde hair wasn't real. What's more, this guy turned out to be the criminal, Alrin Caliph, and someone immediately yelled for the guards to grab him. A bunch of guys in uniform rushed over and tackled him to the ground. They tied his hands to make sure this extremely dangerous criminal didn't escape. This was one of the traps Heaton set up specifically for the Frellis. The prince believed Joshua was the owner, trying to get money for the rebellion. But the real owner was Alrin, who Heaton's been backing. Joshua knew someone was copying him, but he was actually kind of into it. So now, if the club gets shut down, nothing will stick to Joshua. Kiana was relieved this mess might be over, but it ain't done yet. This scumbag had already greased the palms of some guards to make his escape. But Lady Frelai decided to play it, so he'd confess to everything himself. And she loudly told the maid to cash in her chips like, "Now!" 'Cause this whole place is about to go down. Without a word, the maid took off to do what she was told. Just then, Abian Rashini came up to Kiana and thanked her for helping nail the perp. He's the second son of the Rashini family and commander of the capital's 5th Guard. He's also the guy who got the letter Kiana sent before she got here. In it, she suggested he lay low to catch Alrin Caliph. She was betting that the name Alrini would grab Rashini's attention. Caliph iced the Duchess Rashini a while back and bolted with her family's heirlooms. Abayan swore he'd nail him and signed up for the city guard. And a noble joining the guard? That's a real head-turner. Shows you how much Abian's got a beef with Alrin. But if he finds out the prince is backing this crook, all hell's gonna break loose. That's why Kiana straight up said someone's definitely got Alrin's back. And to keep the prince from meddling, she asked the Rashini family to investigate. The guard commander agreed, but told the lady to get out of here. Said this place gives him the creeps, and he's shutting it down. Originally, Abian was sweet on Melissa, but couldn't show it because of his duty. So now not only have they not met, but neither of them's gonna get hitched. Kiana went on to say she was waiting for her maid, who'd gone to exchange some cash. Cash she won fair and square, and wants to grab before the staff skims it off the top. She made it clear she wasn't cheating, just using her damn brain. And she explained how she figured out which cards everyone was likely to get. You gotta be seriously good at math to pull that off. Kiana knew a conversation like this usually made people want to bail, and Abayan straight up admitted that math wasn't exactly his strong suit. Then she explained that Alrin uses the lucky winners as bait to lure in more players, because newbies also rely on luck and throw their money down. That's when Kiana noticed Abian was watching her a little too closely, and he confessed he'd heard rumors about her mistreating her cousin, so he'd always thought she was a shady character. But then Kiana just straight up confirmed the rumors. And then she turned around and asked the captain to keep investigating. But he didn't want to leave her alone, didn't want her to become the talk of the town. That kind of bugged Kiana. She even considered bringing up math again. But for now, she just firmly told Abian to get back to what he was supposed to be doing. Just then, another handsome young dude walked up to them. He introduced himself as Caesar Levain and offered to escort Kiana to a safe place. Abian had heard things about Caesar, and he was glad to finally meet him. Kiana remembered seeing this handsome dude at the store before. She couldn't even believe it was the same Caesar Levain she'd been looking for. The guy who'd convinced the captain he knew Lady Kiana and that everything was cool. Just to be sure, Abian asked her to confirm what this gentleman was saying. The girl saw a chance to get to know the pretty boy Marquis a little better, and the captain wouldn't let up, asking for permission to visit her at her place later. But Kiana turned him down, saying she didn't want any unnecessary meetups. Still, she agreed to his request to express his gratitude for her service. After all, he almost let a criminal slip away unnoticed. Kiana told him to wait until she told him what to do. As the girl waved goodbye, Abian noticed a bruise on her. He immediately got worried and told her to put some ointment on it ASAP. While she did that, he deftly wrapped his handkerchief around her wrist. Kiana realized Alrin must have scratched her somehow, and she got pissed. The captain, after asking the Marquis to look after the lady, started to say his goodbyes. And that's when the girl heard her maid's gleeful voice, who'd cashed in all the chips and was running towards her with 2 huge sacks of cash. Seeing how much gold she'd won, Kiana grinned like a Cheshire cat, and she hugged the maid for getting it all done before closing time. She squeezed so tight, she almost crushed Piegi, who happened to be between them. The Marquis cut them off, saying it was time for them to leave. He warned them he wouldn't take no for an answer, because it's too dangerous for a lady to be here alone. Kiana glanced at Caesar's hand, which he offered like a total gentleman, and since she had a plan for this guy, she politely gave him her hand. Caesar's face instantly lit up with a smile, like his biggest dream just came true. The girl was thinking about how to best start a conversation, and immediately asked why he approached her in a place like this. He confessed he wanted to make a good impression, because he needed a favor from the lady. Kiana started to suspect he wanted to order some magical tools. After all, he always sent requests to the academy, and now he has a chance to ask directly. She figured it out, because she saw his name all over the place, so she can't really say he's a complete stranger. The Marquis liked that confession and complimented her on her talent. Meanwhile, Caesar was acting so chill, he definitely would have noticed Melissa otherwise. But all he cares about is developing magical tools. Using that as her angle, Kiana asked the Marquis to start seeing her. Her proposal was so out of left field, Caesar tripped on a step. He almost ate it, but caught himself, and Kiana got worried she'd freaked him out with the idea. Then Piagi chimed in, saying that dating would be a great move. But Kiana, not wanting to lose her candidate, clarified that it would be a business arrangement, so she started begging the Marquis to just pretend they were dating. Her face was so pathetic that Piagi started chewing her out. But then Caesar yelled and told them both to shut their traps. His shout was so sharp that the lady with the bird got spooked but clammed up. And Caesar suggested they head to his estate and talk this over calmly. They went to his mansion, and there the Marquis treated Kiana to coffee and cookies. He didn't eat anything himself, because he'd lost his sense of taste after the accident. Then the girl apologized for scaring him earlier with her request. She didn't mean to drop that bomb on him so suddenly and without warning. The Marquis got curious about why she even thought of it in the first place. He figured she was just smitten by his surprise appearance. But Kiana thought it was weird that a guy with such a pathetic life would be hanging out in clubs, and she didn't think he was someone to take seriously. At that moment, the Marquis's servant and Kiana's maid couldn't hold back their laughter. Even Piagi was cracking up and teasing Caesar. His laughter was way too much, and Kiana was embarrassed by his behavior. She didn't think of herself as a great mentor, but neither was a Marquis who goes to clubs. He admitted it was his first time out, and besides, he had business to take care of. Now he has no reason to go back there, especially since the club got shut down. Kiana decided not to get into the details, since she just had a business proposition for him. She gave a little smile, and the Marquis was all over her with compliments. But she suddenly got flustered. I mean, it's only their second time meeting, and she noticed how kind and intense his eyes were. She started daydreaming, without even realizing it, about them actually going on dates. She wanted to feel love, just once, like Melissa had. But she switched gears and brought up Rodrigo, the guy they saw at the shop. Kiana explained that he wants to marry her, and he's got the prince backing him up. But she's not into it, which is why she's looking for another way out. Caesar figured Heaton was putting pressure on her family, but he didn't know why. And she went on to say that Rodrigo has always been tight with the prince. Gotta survive in this world, just like that missing prince. So, to ditch her suitor, Kiana begs the Marquis for help. And once again, she asked him to pretend they're a thing, romantically. Because not even the imperial family can force lovers apart like that. In exchange, she promised to help Caesar with his magical research. And when the time comes, she promised to break things off without any drama. But she was worried that their fake relationship might actually turn real. After listening to Kiana, the Marquis smiled mysteriously and said he doesn't usually resort to underhanded tactics. But he's changed a lot in the last few years, and he agreed to the deal. hoping Lady Frelai wouldn't regret it. They shook hands, sealing the deal. Caesar added that there was no going back now, even if she changed her mind tomorrow. The girl didn't quite get what he meant, but she agreed, and he added that he was just being polite, giving her a heads up. Then Kiana found out he didn't have any friends, which was something they had in common. To commemorate this agreement, the lady decided to ask the Marquise for one more thing. She turned to a maid and asked for a small pouch of gold. Kiana wanted the money to set up a lab for her here, because it'd be a pain to get one going back at her estate. Her grandpa won't even let her drink coffee there, and she's used to needing it to keep herself going. Caesar offered to build the lab himself, but she turned him down. Kiana was worried he'd be hitting the clubs and blowing his fortune. That's why she can't exactly trust his financial responsibility. So the Marquis told her to write down everything she needed, and he'd handle the rest. The girl was stoked, plus they can finally go public with their relationship. Then she asked what kind of magical tool the Marquis wanted, and Caesar declared he needed an artifact that changes eye color. Kiana immediately pointed out that an item like that would cause pain, and wondered why he'd even want something like that in the first place. But then she remembered, you usually don't ask why when someone places an order. So, she decided to just focus on the research and stop asking so many questions. The Marquise explained that everything else was easy to change, except for the eyes. Suddenly, Kiana remembered how the last research project ended, and she figured, if the Marquis knows about the tool, then someone else must have tried to create it too. That's when Caesar confessed that he'd been abandoned and didn't trust anyone anymore. He was just a kid back then, but he's a completely different person now, and his once bright and cozy world became incredibly dark. He can't trust anyone, not even his own family, but he's sure he's not the only one like that. So Kiana shouldn't worry. The words about unreliable blood ties made the girl think back. Like, her family went through some messed up stuff too, and they bailed on her. But right now, she wanted to know if the Marquis didn't trust her either. Caesar copped to it, hoping she wouldn't take it the wrong way. Thing is, he doesn't trust anyone. Not his family, not even his first love. But he trusts Kiana's skills, so he's betting they'll get along. She wasn't gonna argue that, seeing as she'd busted her butt to hone her talent. And she agreed to the Marquis's condition. But she had one of her own. Kiana wanted to hold off on publishing the article about the magic tool development. She was worried that the kid, who's probably a prince, might end up in a real jam. This way, she could buy him a little extra time. Caesar agreed to her terms, reminding her one more time that now, even if Kiana wanted to, there was no turning back. And she even suggested spreading rumors about them at the Heighten Festival next week. It'll be easy since they'll be together, showing everyone they're an item. The Marquis was already planning to go, he just didn't have a date. Kiana suddenly got worried she might screw up his debut into high society, but she agreed to go to the ceremony with him, then started saying her goodbyes. As she was heading upstairs, the Marquis called her back, snagging the scarf on her wrist with his finger. It quickly came undone and fell at her feet. Kiana turned around, not quite understanding what the Marquis still wanted. Caesar straight up said he couldn't let his girl go wearing another dude's handkerchief. Then he pulls out his own handkerchief and ties it around her sprained wrist. He didn't give her any medicine, 'cause hey, no returns, right? And the girl got the hint. This was his way of setting up another meet cute. Kiana was lost in thought, 'cause she's not really into returning gifts. Anyway, she said goodbye to the Marquis and called over her maid by the carriage. She slipped her a few gold coins for her hard work and stamina. She knew nothing gets people going like a little cash, and the maid was over the moon. Before they knew it, they were already heading back to the Frelai estate. On the way, Pyagi was just thinking how much he enjoyed watching all the drama unfold. Lady Frelai reminded him that it was time for her little birdie to get to work. She said there should already be a response waiting in the mailbox. But since they got back earlier than expected, she decided to give Pyagi a break. Pyagi suddenly started whining about not wanting to work and lug stuff around. He was also worried that while he was gone, Kiana and Caesar would fall for each other. So the girl started teasing him, saying she'd just have to have some fun herself then. Then she told Pyagi to work faster if he wanted to see everything that was going to happen. The familiar was still unhappy and called her a real piece of work again. But the lady started lecturing him, using all this physics mumbo-jumbo, and Pyagi just made a face because he had to listen to it all. Meanwhile, The Marquis stepped out onto the balcony for some fresh air, and he told his assistant to get rid of the clothes he'd been wearing today. Glancing at that handkerchief again, he asked for it to be sent to Viscount Abian, along with a note saying the handkerchief was being returned from the Marquisate of Lavin. Soon, Pyagi, who transports things through an unseen dimension, was off delivering another letter, even though he wanted to watch Kiana's drama unfold. She's the total opposite of the kind and witty Melissa. And after a job for Melissa, Pyagi often slacked off. He has to work harder with Kiana, but his abilities have gotten stronger. When suddenly, he realized he'd unconsciously put in the effort himself. That's why he was working faster, and Pyagi was getting worried. Because Kiana could push him to work even harder that way. The letter he was delivering thanked Kiana for saving someone's life. Back at the Frelai estate, it was total chaos. Lady Kiana was getting ready as usual, with her maid helping her out. Joshua showed up again, taking advantage of Alex being away. Plus, the capital's a mess, because the Crown Prince tried to off his mentor at the clubhouse. Kiana suddenly realized this was happening way ahead of schedule, so she went to talk to her brother to get the details from him. In the drawing room, besides Joshua, was Duke Scary, asking if Kiana had eaten breakfast. She just woke up and came straight here, so she skipped breakfast. That pissed off the old man, and he ordered her to eat right here, right now. The girl suddenly got anxious, seeing how much they were forcing her to eat. The table was piled high with snacks, from chicken to sweets, and Kiana couldn't imagine how she was supposed to fit all that in. Grandpa suggested she start with some warm soup to get her stomach going, and Joshua decided to help cut her meat, thinking she looked super fragile. The girl started grumbling at everyone, saying she wasn't sick and coffee was enough in the morning. And while she was trying to prove she was perfectly healthy, Joshua held out a mirror to her and asked her to take a good look at her complexion and the dark circles under her eyes. Then Skari ordered the maid to get rid of all the junk food on the estate, and Kiana agreed to eat, but not as much as they wanted her to. Grandpa and her brother watched her slurp down the soup, and the old man promised to make sure she ate well for the next 60 years. Joshua wanted to shut down the research so his sister could get some proper rest, and when Kiana finished her plate, Skari thanked Hao for saving her. He hadn't had the chance before, because he was swamped with academy stuff. Then he asked Joshua to leave, which totally confused the guy. The old man asked him to split so he could thank his granddaughter for her help. And suddenly, Joshua remembered his sister helped catch a perp yesterday. The guy who was biting his style at the gambling den. She noticed the dude wasn't as much of a dead ringer as she thought. She only figured out he was a bad guy by pure chance when she was hanging around the Reloni Duchy. She fibbed, figuring nobody would ever find out anyway, since Alex would clean up the academy. Still, Joshua was more hung up on the fact that a masked, blonde-haired crown prince showed up at the club that night. He pointed out that Orca Cedes used to be the prince's fencing instructor, and he was also with His Highness during that picnic when he took a tumble off the cliff. And when the prince went missing, Orca bailed from the knightly order because he felt responsible. But yesterday, Cedes claimed the crown prince showed up to take him out. The perp ended up surviving, but his wrists were totally shredded. Joshua also remembered that Kiana had injured her wrist too. He was worried her delicate hands might break easily and told her to be careful. She herself remembered that no one had seen a person even remotely resembling the prince. Besides, she didn't see why he'd off his former mentor, even if he was back. The girl noticed how Grandpa was thoughtfully slurping his tea, and Bro's just staring off into space, like he's searching for a brain cell. They're playing dumb, but they're both thinking the same thing. Prince Heaton stood to gain the most from the Crown Prince's disappearance, and His Highness Heaton's inner circle could have done the dirty deed. After Orky's claims of harassment, the prince summoned him. Kiana realized that leaving the letter in the secret compartment had changed the Crown Prince's future and the whole story. Now he's alive and planning his revenge. Any prince in his position would have just let Orca rot in his madness, to keep everyone else scared straight. But all this happened faster than Kiana expected. She can only figure things out once Pyagi brings back the answer. She doesn't agree with her brother, who thinks this isn't their problem. Heighton's going to be too busy to worry about the Frelai family or his marriage to Rodrigo now. But Kiana didn't care, because she'd already found herself a boyfriend. Hearing that confession almost made Grandpa choke on his tea. Just like Joshua, they were both totally blindsided by that. They jumped right on Kiana, grilling her about who this guy was and where he came from. My brother even thought it was that Abian Rashini guy who was hitting on her at the club. He really didn't like that dude and swore he'd beat him to a pulp. And Skari just couldn't believe someone would even try to make a move on his granddaughter. So Kiana explained how it really went down, and that nobody was hassling anybody. Besides, Abian's a captain in the guard. He's not even allowed to get married. Either way, her relatives liked Rashini a whole lot more than Rodrigo. The second son in the Rashini family, everyone's thought he was a saint since he was a kid. Kiana thought he was a dork, but now she understood why Melissa was into him. Still, she finally admitted that her fiancé is Marquis Caesar Levine. Joshua's been ragging on him, saying the guy's just a freeloader who hangs out in clubs. And Skari thinks he's a con artist and can't believe his granddaughter's dating him. Then Kiana confessed it was a fake relationship, and her brother changed his tune. After all, he's got a title, and Kiana can use that to her advantage. But Joshua wanted to be sure it was just a contract, and his sister wouldn't fall for the Marquise, and that she wouldn't ditch her plan if Caesar suddenly got involved with someone else. Kiana even thought her brother had been binging romance novels, and knowing he was writing an article, she asked him to keep it super brief. If she'd known the prince was showing up, she wouldn't have rushed to propose to Caesar yesterday. Just then, the butler started knocking anxiously on the door. He entered the room and reported the important news to the master, that His Majesty the Emperor was headed to the Frelan estate. It was unexpected, and only Kiana suspected the reason for his visit. The Emperor only comes to them when he has a seriously big ask. After all, the Frelan family has always been the royal family's most loyal and reliable servants. When the Emperor makes a request of them, all the family members gather. In order to choose the appropriate summoned being, Kiana didn't want to stay for the meeting, and she planned to slip away. But her grandfather stopped her and asked her to be present. Now she has no choice, because she's got a summoned being of her own. She had a feeling what this was about, even though this meeting was supposed to happen later. When the Emperor walked in, she greeted him politely. His Majesty had heard she'd recently returned from the academy. He noticed right away that one family member was missing, and Skari explained that Alex was absent, but the rest of his descendants were present. Then, following the covenant of lineage, he asked the reason for his visit. The covenant of lineage is an oath of loyalty sworn by the first head of the Frele family. That's why the family's holding discussions to decide which summoning to use. Because of that, the entire Frele family lives in the capital, not in the duchy. And if the direct descendants can't decide, members from the collateral families are called in. Skari was quick to remind everyone that he'd served the royal family before, and that he was ready to continue serving His Majesty and the Empire. The Emperor suddenly coughed and admitted he was very ill, even with treatment. When he gets back, he'll be bedridden again, dealing with the pain for months. But right now, he wants to discuss Orca's claim that he saw Ed. Ed is the nickname for the missing Crown Prince Edmund. The investigation showed that Orca was drunk and hallucinating. However, the Emperor didn't come here to get bogged down in those details. He had a small favor to ask of the Frele family regarding the missing prince. He asked for help to reach the Talis tree himself, so he could pray. This tree grows where the first emperor's buried, and it prefers gemstones to water. When facing tough times, the emperors would offer it jewels and pray. The stone's gotta be big, 'cause the first emperor was all about the bling. Animals can't even get near the tree either, 'cause the first emperor only liked people. And now, the emperor wants to offer the biggest stone, right at the very top of the tree. But summoned creatures ain't gonna cut it, 'cause they're basically animals. Plus, Kiana's not even sure that Pyagi is completely under her control, and remembering that the Emperor can't do anything about her family's arrest, 'cause he's sick, she's starting to wonder if she should even bother with this. Especially since, in the original story, this request never even got fulfilled. Her eyes went to Grandpa, who looked totally wiped. Then, Kiana snuck a peek at her brother, Joshua, who, on the other hand, seemed super into it. It was pathetic watching Skari still clinging to his family status. I mean, he looks drained and lost in his own head. So, Kiana suggested the Emperor attach the stone to an arrow and fire it. His Majesty had considered it, but a stone arrow would be way too heavy. After a moment's thought, the girl offered to handle the problem herself. The relatives went silent, and the Emperor gave Kiana a sharp look. It seemed to him that this lady hadn't quite mastered the Fraley family's special abilities yet. All the girl did was thank him for not kicking her out, seeing as she might not be the real Frelia, and for the Emperor actually answering the dumb questions of a useless lady. After all, he didn't say she couldn't summon a creature, just that she hadn't unlocked the ability yet. Kiana gave her thanks, but the Emperor felt like he'd just been slapped in the face. That's when Skari jumped in, asking how she planned to solve the problem, and he assured the Emperor that this kid could be trusted completely. But the way he said it, it sounded like he was praising his own granddaughter. Kiana declared she'd get everything prepped in time, and the Emperor could head out to the tree. She just asked for a guard who knew their way around a bow and arrow. Before long, they'd all arrived at the Imperial Garden. Kiana was totally stoked. It was the first time she'd ever seen a tree this close, and it was so freaking huge you couldn't even see the top. Then the girl asked His Majesty to hang on for just a sec, and she started pulling out all the stuff she'd specifically bought at the store. She was so hyped, she'd crammed all kinds of crap in there. Plus, she was stoked that His Majesty was still backing the prince. Soon, she whipped up a magic stone that could crank up the heat real fast. That, and an Elixir stone, she's planning to stash in the hot air balloon's basket. And His Majesty, without even batting an eye, handed over the gemstone. The stone was slippery, so Kiana decided to wrap it in paper so it wouldn't fall out. She used a sheet with her notes and tied it all together with rope to make sure it held. The magic thing started heating up, and the balloon began to rise. Now once it's high enough, the archer's gonna pop the balloon so the Elixir drops onto the branch. Kiana was thinking that a bigger version of this thing could even carry people. The Emperor was super impressed, and the girl explained how it worked. That when air heats up, the balloon expands and becomes lighter than air, and that's what lets it float up so easily. Then Kiana got carried away and started talking about buoyancy and equations, and about the laws of hydrodynamics that air follows. But as soon as she started explaining, everyone's faces just glazed over. Kiana didn't even notice. She could ramble about science forever. She always dreamed of an audience that couldn't escape her lectures. Pretty soon, the hot air balloon was high enough to pop. The archer immediately fired, and the arrow sliced through the rope. The Elixir stone tumbled out of the wrapping and plummeted into the branches. His Majesty was stoked that they managed to recover the stone, and he promised to reward Lady Kiana handsomely after his prayers. While he was busy, she was free to keep chatting with his guards, who were just praying for this whole thing to wrap up already. His Majesty approached the tree and silently pressed his palms against it. His eyes were filled with hope and sadness as he prayed. The knights would rather die than listen to Kiana's lectures. They bolted the second they saw the Emperor returning, and they kept saying they were worried because time felt like forever. He just hoped for a miracle, that the prince would come back to them. Then he turned to Lady Kiana and thanked her for her help with the stone. You gotta understand, he's a father, you know? Even if it's not logical, he can't let go of his hope. Even though it keeps hurting him, the Emperor still believes. Kiana wanted to believe too, and she supported His Majesty. But she was curious if there was a reason why the prince couldn't return. With a heavy sigh, he admitted that there was a reason. Rumor has it that the imperial family is immune to poison, which suggests the royal family is blessed by the gods. Now the Emperor was convinced that Kiana possessed special powers, and the girl confessed that she couldn't summon her familiar, but she'd come to terms with it. Besides, she did get a familiar, even if it wasn't the one she wanted. She also believes that the crown prince will answer the Emperor's prayers. His Majesty was so touched by her words that he asked Kiana to become his daughter-in-law, and added that Edmund would be pretty good-looking if he just trimmed down a little. Suddenly, Kiana flashed back to when she was 15 and chucked sheet music at Melissa instead of playing the damn piano. Everyone rushed to Melissa, but Edmund came over to Kiana, asking what was wrong. She felt totally ashamed in front of him and bolted right then and there. She generally avoided the crown prince and never even considered becoming a princess. So now, she honestly confessed to the Emperor that she already had someone special in her life. But he didn't see that as a problem, because if it wasn't serious, then he could just be taken care of. He didn't know who it was, but advised her not to rush into marriage. Then the Emperor remembered Kiana's other name, Ellie, after the most precious jewel, and if Edmund came back, she and him would be a match made in heaven. Then His Majesty reached under his fur cloak. He pulled out a piece of paper, a gift to show his gratitude. It's a document that gives Kiana the right to meet with the royal family anytime. And if the emperor himself can't make it, the empress will see her whenever she's available. The girl politely thanked His Majesty for the generous gift, and he said goodbye, hoping to see her familiar next time. Kiana figured the emperor would be thrilled if someone said they'd seen the prince, even if it was 6 years ago and Edmund was obsessed with revenge. Still, Kiana couldn't tell the palace anything for sure. Besides, the prince might not come back until the real culprit is found, though it would be smart to launch an investigation using his power once he returns. All that's clear is he's got it in for Highton, and Kiana figured she'd give him a hand. She'll pave the way for him, especially since it's her ticket to survival. Kiana told her maid to get ready for a stroll tomorrow, and for her outfit, she asked for a headscarf and a maid's uniform. But she reminded her that the pattern on the scarf absolutely had to be checkered. When night fell over the imperial palace, Prince Highton went out to the garden and walked over to that tree. He'd heard the emperor prayed here with Lady Kiana. The prince didn't buy into that kind of mumbo-jumbo, and it really got under his skin. He pulled out a small gemstone and tossed it toward the tree. The pebble hit the trunk and just seemed to vanish right into it. Heaton was hoping Prince Edmund was dead, or at least never coming back. But then a little breeze rustled the tree's leaves, and a scrap of paper fell right onto Heaton's head. The prince figured it was a note and got all excited, because there's this belief that the gods send messages to the royal family through notes like this. So Heaton got super curious about what it said. Someone wrote that they were on the crown prince's side. Thinking the gods were backing Edmund, Heaton flew into a rage and screamed. Then he started cursing the tree and swore he'd chop it down to the ground. You could hear his screams and curses echoing through the garden for a while after that. The next morning, Kiana got changed, just like she planned, and headed into town. She was looking for a specific stall among all the others on the street. That's where the retired high priest, Mayor Els, could be found. He was super old, and honestly, he didn't even look like a priest anymore. The temple got shut down 20 years ago when they uncovered all the corruption. While the temple staff were lining their pockets, Meyer was too busy hitting the bottle to notice anything. Right now, the Marquise was watching him from around the corner, trying to figure out how to get him moving. He was racking his brain on how to get info about the last relic, and was starting to lose it. Plus, his assistant noticed he was desperate to break off Kiana's engagement. Just then, a visitor showed up at the ex-priest's tent. It was Lady Kiana, disguised as a simple maid. But she wasn't there for a blessing, because she doesn't buy into that superstitious crap. She plopped down in a chair without being asked, and admitted she was there to talk. Plus, she knew who he really was, and Meyer immediately told her to get lost. As far as he was concerned, she was just another one of those temple haters. But there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it. Kiana explained that she actually wanted to show some goodwill towards the gods. Then she gave her servant a signal to pull out the booze from her bag. In 2 seconds flat, there was a bottle of wine and 2 glasses on the table in front of the priest. The guy was confused, but he also felt a sudden urge to drink. And the girl was stoked she nailed the opening line. She offered to be his drinking buddy, saying she could hold her liquor pretty well. After all, she knows this priest used to drink and wreck the temple back in the day. Figuring it wasn't worth arguing, Meyer held out his glass and complimented her people skills. The sound of a cork popping echoed, followed by the splash of wine being poured. The guy didn't hesitate for a second and immediately downed the whole glass. Then Kiana poured one for herself and chugged it too. And they kept drinking like that until a few bottles were empty. Meyer's hands and feet were starting to get cold, but the girl looked totally fine. Now he needed some warm water, and Kiana already had it ready to go. She got him a regular hot water bottle. Those Rama priests steer clear of magic gadgets. The priest held the bottle, feeling the warmth spread through his hands. He kept on drinking. Blessed as he was, he didn't get drunk, but his limbs were freezing. Kiana popped open another bottle of wine and offered him another drink. With each glass, they took turns making toasts. Before long, Meyer started loosening up, acting like any other guy who'd had a few. He was rambling on about his acolytes, and Kiana thought about her grad students. Alice stood by the whole time, keeping the table stocked with bottles. It wasn't long before Meyer started feeling the booze. Kiana asked the maid to wait outside while she talked to the priest, and without another word, she got right to the task. The girl then turned to the blushing guy, who was already drooling all over himself. Kiana demanded he tell her where the last relic of the temple was hidden. She didn't raise her voice, but the Marquis still overheard the conversation. But Mayer explained that he couldn't reveal that information, even if his life depended on it. But then Kiana declared that it was needed for the crown prince. As she said that, she poured him more wine, hoping to loosen his tongue. She kept questioning him for about another hour, but he just kept repeating that it was hidden in a safe place, and he couldn't say where. He couldn't even stomach any more wine, and begged her to leave him alone. But Kiana kept pouring. Another hour in, the girl was flushed from the booze, but still demanded an answer to her question. Just like before, Meyer kept saying he couldn't tell her, but when he could barely hold his head up, he finally cracked and confessed. And Kiana was ready to head to that place right then and there. But then Mayer reminded her that divine power has its own little secrets. And since he got to enjoy the drinks, he decided to let her in on one. Then he admitted that a regular priestess can't just rewind time, not even with the help of divine power. After that, he started feeling rough and asked if they could talk about it another time. And Kiana just walked out, not exactly thrilled with how it went. And Mayer, sensing another guest, said his goodbyes to him as well. In the next moment, the Marquise, who had been hiding around the corner, left the area. Meanwhile, after walking just a few yards, Kiana started to feel really out of it. The maid got worried about her, and she also felt like someone was watching them. She had no proof, just a feeling, and Kiana asked her to just head back to the carriage. Alice insisted that she couldn't be wrong about it. Just then, a vendor shouted from the side, trying to get people to come buy scarves. He announced a 5-minute sale and urged customers to hurry and grab them. Kiana immediately rushed over there to buy herself a scarf. Alice grabbed her right away to keep her from getting into trouble, but she was worried she might accidentally crush the lady's delicate hand. Not knowing what else to do, she let go, and Kiana went tumbling forward. Alice panicked, but just then, the Marquise's aide showed up. He told her not to worry, assuring her that the lady would be fine. The Marquise would take care of Kiana, and the aide asked the maid to wait in the carriage. Knowing there'd be questions, he explained that they were there on business. And Alice started getting pissed at that scarf vendor who'd spoken up at the wrong time. The Marquise had actually ordered that to happen, but that was a secret. Meanwhile, Kiana got caught in a stampede of people also chasing after the scarves. She even wondered if it was payback for, influencing the priest a little too much. She was just about to grab a coffee when someone grabbed her around the waist. She looked up and saw the Marquise, who asked her to stick around with him until the sale was over. He also confessed he was here on business and just happened to spot Kiana. But what kind of business Caesar was up to, he kept totally hush-hush. Kiana figured he was probably a loan shark or something. That's why he wouldn't say. Now she didn't know what to think about him. Good guy or bad news? I mean, if he's mixed up in that kind of stuff, he's just a lowlife. Just then, the sales guy yelled that the sale was extended for another 10 minutes. Not wanting to wait, Kiana asked the Marquise to scoop her up and push through the crowd. But the Marquis said he wasn't as strong as he looked, which made her wonder how he even won the war. Caesar's claiming it was all thanks to his killer strategy. But Kiana was bummed, thinking he was a total weakling, muscles or not. She started fading out, and Caesar got her around the corner, away from the crowd. He helped her get into a more comfy position, said they'd just chill there till the event was over. The girl leaned on his shoulder, and the Marquise took off her glasses so they wouldn't dig in. And as he kept whispering soothing nothings, Kiana drifted off to sleep. She dreamed of a voice, hissing about how much it loathed the imperial family, and how it was plotting to wipe them all out and claim the throne soaked in blood. After a while, Kiana opened her eyes and saw the Marquise, telling her to get some more rest. She remembered trying to get the old guy drunk, and then started looking around. They were still in that alley, and Caesar wanted to know what she was doing in a place like that. But she didn't want to answer, and besides, she was still kind of shaken up. Truth is, she was looking for a relic that proves her royal bloodline. This relic vanished without a trace, but the imperial court didn't give a damn. But Kiana's known where it is since she was 12. One time, her grandpa's brother, Julius Verlai, came to visit. The emperor summoned him, wanting to know where that relic was. The emperor asked Skari to handle the search, after waiting 10 freaking years. It was supposed to be a secret, and Kiana didn't get why Julius was blabbing about it. But since he was heading back north soon, he decided to spill the beans. Turns out the high priest hid that relic real good. And he's not gonna spill the beans till he's plastered. But right now, he can't even afford a drink. Julius blabbed, 'cause keeping Kiana happy was more important than keeping his mouth shut. And now she's trying to squeeze out the secret, which is why she needed to get hammered. But she never actually told the Marquise what secret she was after. Caesar didn't push it and just stroked Kiana's hair. It felt so good, she asked the Marquis to keep doing it. Then she started getting sleepy again and just flopped onto his lap, closing her eyes. The last time she felt this comforted was with Julius, and it felt good to feel warm hands again. Mom used to take care of her like that too, but nobody else ever could. Kiana, still half asleep, mumbled that Pieggi wasn't Melissa's familiar. She kept saying it, but nobody believed her, and eventually she stopped believing it herself. Because she didn't trust her own instincts, the girl felt incredibly alone. The Marquise listened to her rambling and started to understand what she'd been through. Then she confessed that she started believing in herself again when she began studying magical tech. What's more, even total strangers started to take her seriously. And she loves the tech because it gives her confidence. Then, in a sleepy voice, Kiana started asking how the Marquise was doing. He admitted that he hadn't quite wrapped up a certain matter yet, but he managed to make some progress, thanks to someone's help. He even pulled a dirty trick to dig deeper, but still didn't get the answer he wanted. Either way, he doesn't see his actions as a complete waste of time. Caesar admitted he shut himself off from everyone after going through hell, because the people he trusted screwed him over big time. Kiana herself got burned after spending 7 years at the academy. She trusted everyone and dedicated herself to the cause, completely clueless. She got curious about how the Marquise would act in a similar situation, and he confessed that he'd become the very thing he used to hate. After all, he's constantly using people and doesn't believe he can truly connect with anyone. Kiana suddenly stood up and asked him not to let others see him as a heartless bastard. She also asked me not to think so badly of myself and to stop hating myself. She believes I can become a better person if I try, and asked me not to push away new connections. Kiana's face twisted into a drunken smile, but she asked the Marquise to be happy. And then she started fading again, and went limp in Caesar's arms. He started begging her to hold on, because he wanted to ask her something. He wants to know what allows her to keep striving towards the light. And without opening her eyes, she started explaining everything again in scientific terms. But it didn't last long, because she passed out again, and she started dreaming again, hearing voices discussing something about a prince and a hunt, and also that the prince himself can't trust anyone now, and that everyone is just a means to an end for him. While she was dozing off, her maid was waiting for her, scanning the crowd. The Marquise's assistant stayed with her, and they were both hoping everything was all right. Meanwhile, Alice was still cursing out whoever caused this whole mess. But soon, they saw Kiana walking towards them, leaning on the Marquise. The maid rushed to her side immediately, asking if anything had happened. And Kiana confessed that she'd fallen asleep and had a really weird dream. The Marquise, seeing that Kiana was safe, said goodbye and started to head back. But he didn't get far. He and his assistant ducked behind a corner and watched. He wanted to figure out why the lady was looking for a sacred relic and why she mentioned the crown prince. Kiana hurried back, wanting to deliver the letter to the Rashini Duchy while she still had time. She also spilled to Alice about the Marquis's absolutely pathetic athletic skills, and with his shady business dealings, he was just becoming more and more repulsive to her. But now she got why a guy who looked like that had never had a girlfriend. Those words hit the Marquis hard. He wanted to explain, but he couldn't. Meanwhile, Kiana was already feeling better. Her hangover was fading fast. Now her goal was to find that relic and make sure nobody else got their hands on it. She was worried that Heaton would find it and try to destroy it. Plus, Mayer might blab to him when he's drunk, just like he did with her. The girl remembered the kid in the forest and figured he was using the gift she gave him to make it easier to blend in and not give himself away in public. Plus, he was a swordmaster, and those guys can mask their faces with their aura, which is why people's memories of them tend to be kind of fuzzy. And if the crown prince changed his appearance, we need that relic to get him back on the throne. But there's a chance one of his close aides survived and is plotting revenge in his place. Kiana, though, was hoping the prince was still alive, or that he had a kid. She was so lost in thought that the maid had to call her over and ask her to get in the carriage. Kiana admitted she'd been thinking about the crown prince. Then she got into the carriage, and they headed off to the Frele estate. The Marquis was still around the corner, totally stunned by everything he'd just heard. He was going to tail the lady, but his assistant started trying to talk him out of it. Kiana chilled out for the rest of the day, finally feeling alive again. But her head was spinning with all the crazy stuff she'd blurted out to the Marquis, and that info from Meyer. Specifically, that a priestess's divine power can't actually turn back time. Now she was stressing about how it all happened, but doubted she could change anything anyway. Still, one of her goals was to let Grandpa know that Heaton was targeting their family. Even though the old man already knew that Prince hated their guts, she was still naively hoping Grandpa would just fix everything for her. So the girl decided to do everything she could on her own. Late that night, she left the house, and the maid saw her off. But Alice was told to stay put at the estate, because Muscle wasn't going to help with this. The maid was a little shocked she wasn't needed. Plus, she was worried about the lady, but she told her not to fret. And Alice, almost in tears, promised she'd train harder and get even stronger. She also couldn't believe she was going to miss a once-in-a-lifetime show. After saying goodbye to the maid, Kiana headed off to a secret rendezvous with Abiyan Rashini, who was curious where she wanted to go at this hour. Kiana had sent him a letter earlier, asking him to keep her company, and now she explained she needed to go to a pretty dangerous place. She didn't want to bring any knights along, so as not to worry her grandfather. Besides, for the captain of the guard, this was a chance to repay his debt to her. Before she told him their destination, Kiana demanded he keep his trap shut, because they were headed to Alfred Harbor, Pier 4. That place was recently searched for smuggling, and Abiyan got worried the lady was involved. But she assured him that if that were the case, she wouldn't bring the captain of the guard along. She even snapped that his logic was flawed and suggested he brush up on his math. Right now, he should just focus on providing security. Abiyan agreed, but asked her to answer all his questions later. Meanwhile, on the other side, a figure in a cloak was heading towards the pier. Soon, he saw what he was looking for, a statue of a goddess. The man was Marquis Caesar Levine, and he was thrilled to have found it first. Getting closer, he touched the feather on the statue's wing to unlock the secret compartment. And instantly, a stone with a magical pattern dropped from the base of the pedestal. You gotta do this when the moonlight hits the statue. That's the only way the secret stash opens. This relic glows in the hand of someone with royal blood, and right now, it was glowing in the Marquis's hand. He really should thank Kiana for this find. He couldn't have pulled it off without her. And then he remembered her advice, that he could try to be a better man. He used to think being good meant being a chump, someone everyone takes advantage of. But now it clicked why Kiana wasn't giving him the time of day. Caesar thought the love-struck kid was long gone. But right now, he can't shake the feeling that Kiana might show up here too. 6 years back, when they first crossed paths in the woods, he knew exactly who she was. He didn't need any confirmation. He'd recognize her, even if he didn't want to. Fate played a messed-up trick on him. Everyone stabbed him in the back. And this girl, who he probably can't even get close to, saved his skin. But he needs her abilities to get back on top, even though he doesn't want to put her in harm's way. That's why he kept sending her research requests, to keep her safe at the academy longer. But she came back anyway, and in that alley, he felt like that clueless crown prince all over again. He could feel his heart starting to waver. And now, he left a note in the stash, telling her to steer clear of those dangerous artifacts. The Marquis figured if things stay quiet, the investigation will just die down. And get this, he even left a gemstone here for Kiana as a thank you. Suddenly, he picked up on some seriously sketchy rustling, so he immediately ducked behind the corner, trying to stay out of sight. Then, the Marquis overheard voices, hashing out their next move. It was Kiana's voice, and it became clear she was with the captain of the guard. They had to ride here, and now the girl's whole back was killing her. And Abiyan finally understood why the lady didn't bring her lover along. The girl was surprised that word of this got to the captain so fast, and she found out the Marquis returned the handkerchief, showing he'd found someone new. That's when she started going off about how useless he is, saying he definitely couldn't handle any bandits that might be around. That threw Abion for a loop, cause the Marquise was giving off major swordmaster vibes. Kiana paused for a sec, but they weren't here to stand around jawing. So, she told the captain to turn around while she took care of something. Abiar Rashini obediently faced the horse, even though he was itching to peek, and the girl popped open the hidden compartment and found a note and a gemstone. The next thing you know, she's letting out an angry growl, and she confessed to her escort that they'd just been chasing their tails. Then she decided to scribble something on that note herself. After that, she slipped it back in the hiding spot and suggested they head back. It bugged her, but she was used to hitting dead ends all the time. If she'd given up, she wouldn't be able to do her research. The captain just confessed he's been training to overcome setbacks too. He's even jealous of the crown prince, who never had to deal with that kind of crap, 'cause he could master techniques in one try that take others forever to learn. Abian started ranting about how the prince was a genius, and everything came easy to him. That's when Kiana got curious why he couldn't handle his weight problem. Not knowing what to say, the captain guessed there wasn't any need for him to. Then he admitted that Kiana seemed just as naturally gifted to him. And she is, she just hit a rough patch this time. And since there's nothing left for them here, the girl suggested they bounce again. But just then, the captain stopped her, saying he didn't think they'd come all this way for nothing. He paused for a second, giving her this look like she should already know what he meant. Little did they both know, the Marquise was watching their every move. And Abian suggested Lady Frelai make a wish at the goddess statue. The girl didn't buy into superstitions, but she agreed anyway, and Caesar suddenly felt a pang of jealousy, because the captain was turning out to be kinder and better than she'd expected. Kiana gazed at the statue, which seemed to shimmer in the moonlight, and she started thinking about what to wish for, something she wouldn't regret later. But in the end, she asked for the crown prince to be alive. That's what she wanted most. She wished for Edmund to return to the throne, safe and sound. Hearing her whisper that, the Marquise was totally thrown, and the captain was curious why the lady wished for that specifically. But the girl wouldn't say, and just told him to come back. Still, Abian wondered who she'd be with at the royal banquet, and she admitted she'd be with Marquis Caesar Levine. The captain accepted it, even though he wanted to escort her himself. He wanted to get to know her better, but realized he'd missed his shot. Then, Kiana said that he wouldn't be able to see her any clearer, even if she did go to the banquet with him, because he'd need like a super high-powered microscope for that. The captain didn't get what she meant, but he didn't argue. Then, he offered to let her go back himself, like he hadn't heard her asking before. He helped Kiana onto the horse and confessed he had a question for her, but since it was so late, he decided to ask her next time. And as they rode off, the Marquise came out of hiding, trying to figure out what Kiana had said. That morning, Caesar called his assistant, Raynak, and asked what it meant to wish for a normal life. Like, when someone tells another person they can become better and happier. And then he asked the assistant to describe how he was feeling right now. Raynak was thrown. He answered the first question, but now he was stumped. And then Caesar wondered if he knew anyone in the empire who genuinely wanted him to come back as the crown prince. The assistant froze, racking his brain trying to think of everyone he knew and didn't know. But he couldn't give an answer, especially since he'd only just arrived in the capital. And now the Marquise was even more curious why Kiana had made such a wish without hesitation. He was also wondering if she'd even taken his heartfelt words to heart. After all, he checked later to see what the girl had written back to him. She thought he was some kind of lowlife and told him to get lost and not tell her what to do. Meanwhile, in a distant southern region of the empire, in a dense forest, a white dove landed on a wide stump, a note tied to its leg. Alex Frelai spotted it from the bushes and started to approach. He was a little annoyed that the bird always arrived silently and asked it to make some kind of noise. He was already messed up enough from the constant nightmares. But he pulled out the note and started reading it real close. The wolf, his summoned creature, was right next to him and got spooked when Alex started cursing. After reading it, he looked even crazier than usual in the dead of night. All the guy did was hiss that they needed to get back to the Reloni Duchy. Alex was just like his grandpa, and he looked after his sister when he was little. He remembers their mom holding that tiny kid in her arms, and when she ran off with the coachman, the family fell apart in an instant. Then Kiana left for the academy. But the fact that she's back at the Duke's mansion means she's taking a step toward the family. Alex was seriously pissed about the message he just got, because he's got to head to the academy to take care of some business. The wolf immediately crouched down so his master could climb on, and snarling with rage, he ordered him to run faster, to get there and settle things. Lorelei's magazine soon had an article about Marquis Levine and Lady Frelay's romance. But the bigger deal was the banquet for Prince Heaton's birthday. Joshua sent his sister a ton of new dresses for the occasion. But Kiana wasn't trying to outshine everyone, especially not in dresses that weren't plaid. So, she asked the maid to send everything back to Joshua. Kiana decided to wear what she wore last time, her favorite plaid dress. This pattern was super important to her, because she's obsessed with science and math. Alice thought her taste was unique, but it kinda came out sounding disrespectful. Pissed off, Kiana demanded coffee, and no herbal tea crap. She was totally faking the anger, just to make sure she got that coffee, especially since her attempt to bribe the doctor to approve it totally flopped. Suddenly, she was missing her academy days, when this wasn't even an issue. And ever since she came back, she's been dreaming about that place a lot. She also dreamt of her parents, back when they were still together. Then she'd hear her mom crying. She'd been having nightmares like that since she was a kid. They even took her to a shrink. He figured the psychological stress was why she was still having these dreams. He talked about dreams that never came true, and suggested we keep it from the folks upstairs. Kiana went along with it then, 'cause she didn't want to look greedy. Growing up, she mostly played by herself, never letting anyone get close. She also faked being sick a lot to get out of those fancy social events. But even then, she found ways to give her cousin Melissa a hard time. Then the rumors started that Kiana had become buddies with Judith from the Pervs family. Now, with Kiana back to playing chess by herself, the maid announced that the Duke wanted to see her, to thank her for healing Hao. Figuring Grandpa wanted to give her something, she got ready right away. Plus, before the banquet, Kiana wanted to ask him for a favor. Meanwhile, back at the Pervez estate, Rodrigo walked into the room where his sister Judith was. She was in the middle of writing a letter to Kiana, since the imperial banquet's tomorrow. She wanted to know why she was back. Judith was the one and only noble lady in the whole empire, after all, and she always loved being the center of attention. She'd hated the Freley family and their special abilities since she was a kid, but she was also glad Kiana was back, because she always visited Rodrigo. That's the only reason Judith was always so welcoming to her. Plus, Kiana saw her as a friend and was easily persuaded to make Melissa's life even more difficult. It was especially hilarious when Kiana threw a fit in front of everyone. Even her parents were stoked because they thought she was a major upgrade from Freley. Plus, Kiana was a dead ringer for the late Duchess Enos, and if she marries Rodrigo, the Pervs family's gonna be even more loaded. They were always whispering in her ear, saying it was for her own good and the family's, because everyone still remembers the stink that went down with Duchess Enos's death. Judith also told Kiana not to get close to anyone, because everyone sees her as the family screw-up. And Kiana trusted her friend's words more than her own family's. Anyway, one fine day, she took off for the academy. Now, Judith's scheming to make sure Kiana never shows her face at another event. She wants to break her down and turn her back into her little puppet. Besides, nothing's stopping Rodrigo from marrying that girl later. He was super grateful to his sister for looking out for him like that. He figured everything would have gone smoothly anyway if Orca hadn't lost his damn mind. Judith told her brother not to rely too much on the prince's help, but Rodrigo was sure the prince would keep covering for him, because he'd poisoned the crown prince, who thought he was immune to poison, of all things. When Kiana walked into her grandpa's study, she saw a mountain of jewelry. Skari himself told the butler to buy all the latest trendy stuff. The girl thanked him for the gift and promised to put it to good use at the banquet. The Duke remembered that Julius was also supposed to arrive that day, and then he told his granddaughter to let him know if she needed anything else. Kiana asked for coffee, but the old man wouldn't budge until she was as healthy as Alex. That's when the girl made another request. This one about the imperial banquet. Skari hadn't been to a banquet in years, and Melissa and Alex had taken his place, which left Melissa all alone, at the mercy of Judith Pervez. She was pulling all the stops, trying to get on the good side of every guy around. Kiana didn't give a damn about public opinion, but she learned something from Melissa. that Judith and her whole crew were definitely gonna pull some crap again. Remembering how worried Grandpa was that he'd dropped the ball raising her, Kiana wanted to confess about all the dirty little secrets she'd been hearing. But those weren't the last crimes the Purves family committed. The Onstone mine exists, so the Frelay Dukedom's soldiers can keep warm up north. A year later, the Purves family forged the mine's records, and that'll be the proof to accuse the Frelay family of treason. Now Kiana wasn't just out for revenge, she was settling family scores, and she asked her grandpa to make sure Julius absolutely attended this banquet. Meanwhile, Julius was riding through the forests and fields, thinking about the attempt on his brother's life, and how dumb he was to let an assassin get close. And now he considered it his duty to set Duke Frelay straight. On his shoulder sat Daram the squirrel, a summoned creature, asking him to make a decision. Isn't she getting a little tired of him constantly switching between insulting and praising his brother? Suddenly, Julius noticed a carrier pigeon flying towards them, but it flew right past. The pigeon was carrying a message saying the killer offed himself, so there's no need to come. But Julius hasn't been to the capital in ages. He can only make it once every 10 years. And even then, it's when he uses his abilities. He even missed Inessa's funeral. Daram sympathetically supported his master during moments like these. And he never believed her death was an accident. Not after he raised her. Ines was the daughter of a high-ranking nobleman from the north, but she lost her family, and Julius took her under his wing. Then she married Skari's eldest son. The last time Julius saw her, she was happy, and then this whole mess happened. So Julius believed if Kiana wasn't Hyde's daughter, then she had to be Enis's kid, and he was itching to see what kind of woman she'd become. Even Squirrel was dying to meet her, to figure out why the boss was so obsessed. Last time Julius was there, something about Kiana just felt really familiar. The old man figured she had a real problem if she still hadn't summoned her beast, which also means Kiana's powers might show up in some totally unexpected way. And Daram just blurted out, all excited, that Julius had actually said something smart for once. I mean, he'd been trying to drill that into his head for 10 years. But Julius just shot that down, said Squirrel's abilities had nothing to do with it. He was just sure that if something messed up was going down there, he needed to be in the thick of it. A little while later, Kiana received a gift from the Pervez Duchy. It was a hairpin sent by Judith, along with a note. In it, she wrote that she was expecting Kiana to visit, now that she was back. She wrote that she picked out the hairpin with her parents, who always treated Kiana like a daughter. She bought one just like it for herself, but in blue, and it would be a great match. Reading the last lines, that Judith considered her a friend, Kiana crumpled the letter. She tossed it towards the trash can, but it bounced right off the rim, and the maid immediately picked it up, not wanting any trash lying around. Alice noticed the hairpin was heavy and worried that her mistress might hurt her fingers. But Kiana asked her to prepare it, intending to wear it later. She also told me not to worry about Judith, because Kiana's way smarter than that lowlife now. Duke Pervez isn't just gonna have a bad day today. Before long, Judith was at the party with her brother. Kiana wasn't there yet, but she spotted Prince Heaton with his mom. Princess Celiette wasn't around either, but nobody really cares about her anyway. Judith remembered Kiana dating someone, and Rodrigo explained it was some commoner. He figured she was just latching on to anyone to avoid the pressure. And his sister was planning on reminding her of some old baggage today. But then she noticed the front doors opening again. The guests gathered there gasped when they saw the couple walk in. For a moment, everyone held their breath as the two of them crossed the threshold. And then, they announced the arrival of Lady Kiana Frelay and Marquis Caesar Levine, with great fanfare. The Marquis looked extremely pleased, but the lady's face was serious. And as they passed Judith, she nearly fainted. Kiana and Caesar walked right by, not even giving her a second glance. She only snapped out of it when the guests started whispering behind her back. She also noticed that Kiana was actually wearing the jewelry she'd sent. This made Judith realize that Kiana was still listening to her. She was happy about that, but at the same time, she was jealous that Kiana had such a handsome man. But then it hit her. She couldn't actually picture his face. Next thing you know, some smooth music starts up, and everyone's hitting the dance floor in pairs. Kiana noticed the Marquis was a surprisingly good dancer, especially since he usually seems to struggle with anything physical. Then he confessed he was just being careful that time, because his date was totally plastered. And usually, he can handle not just a crowd, but even some real tough guys down at the docks. The Marquis admitted he goes to the docks a lot and always comes back in one piece, which just made Kiana think he was some kind of shady character, just confirming her suspicion that a handsome bachelor can't be on the up and up. She even started to think her plan to fall for Caesar and marry him was going down the drain. The Marquis wanted to ask her something, and Kiana agreed, as long as it was about science. But Caesar had a question about the human heart, and he wants her take on it. He's curious why a girl would worry about a guy she barely knows. Kiana figured she was either bored or that girl was just plain dumb. Or maybe, deep down, she's got a little something for him. That answer got the Marquis thinking, and all sorts of ideas started swirling in his head. His ears even turned red, which totally gave away his embarrassment. Kiana noticed and thought Caesar was talking about himself. Suddenly, he pulled her in tighter, because Rodrigo was totally staring at them. Dude was definitely fixated on his dream girl dancing with someone else, and he was losing it with rage. Kiana noticed him, and she even liked his reaction. Rodrigo was the most annoying of the whole Purvis family to her. He'd already lost Melissa, and now Kiana too, which honestly made her happy. And just to piss him off even more, she snuggled closer to the Marquis. Caesar noticed that his lady had disliked that guy from the start. Kiana confessed that when she was little, she used to follow him around everywhere, and the Marquis realized that she actually liked someone else, like the Crown Prince. But she objected, explaining that she had different tastes as a kid, and asked him not to set her up with just anyone, just because she hates Rodrigo now. Comparing him, a prince, to just anyone kind of bummed the Marquis out. He wasn't about to let Kiana tell him to just forget about the past. Dancing with her now, he wished he could be that kid he used to be. The way he looked at her then, it was like he'd known Kiana his whole life. He looked like someone who really cared. A total charmer. The dance ended soon after, and Kiana suggested everyone get back to what they were doing. Just as she was about to leave, he offered her a cream-filled cookie. Then he offered her some candy and some lemon soda too. He explained he figured she might be hungry after dancing, so he got everything ready. He even admitted he really enjoyed dancing with her. And while Kiana was munching on the cookie, the Marquis was wiping crumbs off her chin. Only then did he agree to leave her, saying it was like a dream. Then Caesar took off, and Kiana watched him until he disappeared into the crowd. It only just hit her that he was talking to her in some kind of cryptic way. She also realized that she'd never actually danced at banquets before, and now it dawned on her that she was seriously hungry after all that dancing. That's when Abian Rashini came up to her and asked her for the next dance. Kiana wasn't expecting that, but it wouldn't be polite to turn him down. Still, she asked if they could postpone the dance for an hour, because she was tired. Suddenly, someone started complaining about the captain of the 5th Guard asking a lady for a dance. Nix, the captain of the 1st Guard, also known as the town drunk, walked up to them. He used to be the Crown Prince's bodyguard and part of the hunting party crew, and now he's calling out Abian for barging into the clubhouse, saying he doesn't give a damn about the rules because he's some high-ranking noble. Nix even had the nerve to mock Rashini for flirting with a lady who's considered a disgrace to the Frilay family. That's when Kiana jumped in, calling Nix a real piece of work. Then she glared at him like she was about to tear him limb from limb right there. Nix, trying to play it cool, decided to show some manners and greet her. But then he accidentally stepped on her foot, and it really hurt. Both captains freaked out, worried the lady was injured, but she didn't even flinch. She just scolded Nix for forgetting the #1 rule: no drinking on duty. And after she smacked him upside the head, she called him a total disgrace to the guard. But then Kiana acted like she misspoke, and added that the captain of the 1st Guard was a disgrace to Prince Heaton. That blatant insult sent Nix into a rage. He wanted to fire back, but then Kiana stomped on his foot with her heel. The pain was intense, and the captain barely kept himself from screaming, and the girl just explained her action with some boring scientific term. But that wasn't enough for her, and she pressed her sharp heel harder into Nix's foot. She actually wanted to beat him to a pulp right then and there, but she held back. She just advised him not to call someone a disgrace to the family to their face, especially her. That's when Kiana took her heel off his foot, hoping the captain got the message. And in a creepy whisper, she asked if he was scared yet. But then he straightened up and barked at her, his breath reeking right in her face. It made her sick. After she'd been drinking herself, that kind of smell just turned her stomach. So, stepping back, she told him not to talk to her, no matter how urgent his business was. He seemed like he was just waiting for that and said his goodbyes right away. Then Kiana explained to Abian that she had another meeting and started to say goodbye too. Meanwhile, back in the Lauditon quarter, Joshua was debating whether to go to the reception. He wasn't supposed to be there because of his status, but he didn't want to leave his sister alone. He was worried she'd get lost in the crowd or get trampled, even though she could probably beat up anyone there. His snake was just smirking as Joshua fought it, all while eagerly picking out an outfit. He remembered his sister was supposed to meet Julius at the reception, and Joshua has some seriously bad history with that guy. But if Kiana's meeting him, at least she won't be alone. The snake reminded him again that that girl can handle herself. Joshua decided to go to the reception anyway, just to clear his conscience. He justified it by telling himself he had something important to tell Kiana. Meanwhile, Kiana went out to the garden, looking for a big fountain in a secluded spot. She soon found the place she was looking for and peeked at it from behind the bushes. A girl with long blue hair was sitting by the fountain. That was Princess Celiette Tylus, daughter of the 5th Empress. This princess was without family or support, completely forgotten by everyone. Suddenly, a man's voice boomed out, announcing he'd dismissed the guards and maids, because now everyone in the court answers only to him. Celiette shot to her feet, ready to bolt. But the guy stopped her. He grabbed her arm tight and yanked her close. He announced that rumors would soon spread that she'd spent the night with him, and if some noblemen happened to see them now, Prince Heaton would be forced to marry them off. They'd be considered long-time lovers, despite the difference in their social standing. Besides, even though he's a servant, he's half nobleman. He was dead certain that Prince Heaton would find out about this. Kiana saw that creep blackmailing the princess, and she totally lost it. And he was saying that no one could help Celeste, even if she screamed. Just then, bam! He got a jolt of electricity to the neck that made him see stars. He went down hard, and Kiana leaned over him and called him a pervert. The princess couldn't believe someone actually came to her rescue. While Kiana was chewing him out, the scumbag threatened her with his connections. She didn't give a damn. He was beneath her anyway, and he'd pay for what he did. Then Kiana held out the taser and threatened to fry him again. It was her personal self-defense weapon, still in the prototype stage. This thing can take down even a swordmaster, and you can buy it in the Frelay Duchy. The guy was about to get zapped again, so he bolted like his tail was on fire. This loser's name is Ben Eyelid, and he's a servant in the Crown Prince's court. And he's one of the guys who was at that hunting trip fiasco. Once he was gone, Kiana asked if the princess was all right. Up close, Celiette was even more stunning, and it was obvious why the 3rd Empress was stirring up trouble. But now the princess hoped this whole thing with that guy wouldn't blow up. Although Kiana wasn't talking about that, she just wanted to know if Her Highness was hurt. She explained that what mattered was how she was feeling right now. And in the next second, tears started streaming down the princess's face. She tried to explain, but all that came out was broken sobs. And Kiana stayed right there with Celiette until she cried it all out. Originally, the princess was supposed to scream the second they attacked, and Ben, the servant, would have bolted. But some fancy ladies were strolling nearby. They heard the scream, and in the end, only Celiette's reputation took a hit. Kiana knew nothing serious would happen, but the princess was genuinely terrified. So Lady Frelay decided to give her a taser, just in case something like that happened again. She showed her how it worked and told her not to hesitate to fry that lowlife. Celiette couldn't accept a gift from someone she didn't know, but Kiana talked her into it, then got ready to head to her own appointment. And the princess was all like, "How can I even thank you for your help? I mean, this girl didn't just save her from some creep. She actually comforted her." Truth is, Kiana did have a favor to ask of Her Royal Highness, but she felt weird asking a victim for something. But she didn't want to refuse since the princess offered. So, Lady Freya asked the princess for 2 things. First, she asked her not to tell anyone about the stun baton. And second, she suggested Celeste get a recording device for situations like that. If this kind of thing could be secretly recorded, it'd be crucial evidence. But to build one, you need esfra petals, and those only grow in the 5th Empress's greenhouse, which, conveniently, the princess inherited. Esfra is a rare flower packed with magic. It's about to bloom, and Kiana asked for some petals. She explained that's exactly why she came, but she walked in at the worst possible time. And Cilietta promised to get those petals to her savior. After that, they finally said their goodbyes. Silite was even happy about it. Now she had an excuse to see that lady again. She recognized her and now understood why she was Ed's first love. Meanwhile, on the other side of the garden, Judith was begging her parents to go meet with Kiana. She had a special plan, and she needed Rodrigo's help to pull it off. Judging by Lady Frelay's behavior, she figured everything would go according to plan, who sweetly thanked her for the gift and letter she sent. In return, she invited her to meet her parents in the garden after the second dance. Judith quickly found the place mentioned in the letter, and she was already itching with anticipation. Soon, she spotted Kiana and immediately started waving her hand. Kiana calmly walked towards her, knowing that she was putting on an act, and Judith was annoyed that her friend had become so beautiful, but she kept quiet. Getting closer, she noticed that the hairpin really suited Kiana, but then she suddenly declared that she didn't like the accessory and headed towards the Duke and Duchess. They were happy to see Kiana, who had become very similar to Ennis, but the girl herself started feeling sick because they reeked of booze too. The Dukes were sweating it, worried everyone was digging up the past and that Kiana didn't even have a familiar. Then the Duchess noticed Kiana was wearing a hairpin just like Judith's, and Kiana realized their reaction wasn't the same as before. Still, she admitted she'd been hearing stuff like that her whole damn life, and the Dukes constantly reminded her she wasn't a real Frelai. Judith always hammered it home that no one would ever love someone like Kiana. That's when the Duchess started making excuses, saying they only wanted what was best. She leaned in close, and Kiana knew she couldn't hold it back. The disgusting smell made her puke right on the Duchess's dress. Suddenly, a huge crash echoed from behind the Dukes, and from the rising dust emerged a man, absolutely livid at the Purvis family. It was Julius, and he was seeing red after seeing Keanu in such a state. And for all the trash the Dukes had been talking about her this whole time, at his age, he can still teach them a lesson, and he doesn't give a damn about appearances. He figured the Dukes themselves were ancient and practically falling apart physically. Duke Pervez was the first to go flying, and the old man took off after the Duchess. But then, it felt like a jolt of electricity shot through his neck, and he felt a sharp pain. Kiana, who was still throwing up, started to worry about her relative. Right then, the guards came running up and offered to take the injured man to the infirmary. Now, the old guy's lower back was killing him too, and the soldiers laid him down on a stretcher. But then Duke Scary Freelay himself showed up, totally clueless about what was going on. Turns out, he'd also heard Duke Pervs bad-mouthing his granddaughter and saying she wasn't worthy of the Lady Freely title. Kiana was super surprised. She didn't expect to see Grandpa there, and he couldn't believe what they'd done to his brother, driving him to this. But what really pissed him off was Pervs filling Kiana's head with garbage since she was a kid. Then, out of nowhere, Joshua appeared and reminded everyone that Kiana had been hiding and withdrawn since childhood because of the Pervs family. Noticing his sister was paler than usual, he suggested they get out of there. Grandpa could handle the rest, especially since he's gotten even tougher with age. Kiana couldn't figure out how her grandpa and brother, who never went to banquets, suddenly showed up. But she was stoked that the Purvis family was finally going to get what was coming to them. She even took off the hairpin they gave her and tossed it in the fountain like it was garbage. Then, saying she didn't want to see what happened next, she agreed to go see Julius. Basically, everything was going exactly as she planned, and this was just the beginning. Back in the ballroom, a chandelier crashed, and the Marquis started freaking out about Kiana. His assistant, Ranyak, told Mr. Caesar Levine that she was in the infirmary with an injured relative. He also said the carriage was ready at the entrance, but the Marquis decided to head to the infirmary too. After all, even if he was just a fake fiancé, he had to play the part till the end. He kept telling himself it was all just for show and nothing more. But his assistant seemed to see more than Caesar was letting on. He didn't argue, though, and just silently followed him to the infirmary. A bunch of doctors were already working on the old guy, trying to help him out. Julius passed out for a while, and they started thinking he'd kicked the bucket. But then he suddenly opened his eyes and told everyone to cut the drama. He also announced he was ditching the Perverso's contract for supplies from Onsock. That's exactly what Kiana was hoping for. It's way more effective if Julius makes that call. The girl was pleased, but she still wanted to ask the old man for something else. So she walked up to him and said she had something that could replace onsock. It's called febble ore, and if you grind it up and carry it in your pocket, it oxidizes and gives off heat. Julius was totally down with the idea and agreed to roll with it. Joshua, though, had heard that getting your hands on that ore was a real pain these days. Then Kiana confessed they'd found a flebblestone mine on the Marquis's land, and not far from the north either. Joshua was blown away. Seemed like a crazy stroke of luck. Suddenly, the door slammed open, and the medics started yelling about an emergency patient. The guy started moaning like crazy, and Kiana thought that voice sounded awfully familiar. Turns out, the captain of the first guard was somehow seriously messed up and screaming in agony. Especially his foot, which Kiana had, encountered earlier, was totally crushed. Nisk kept screaming and rambling on about seeing the crown prince. He even pointed out the silver hair, saying he could spot him a mile away. Then Alice burst into the infirmary, begging Keanu to come back to the duchy. A chandelier fell in the hall. It's a total mess, and the lights are flickering like crazy. Right after the first blackout, Captain Nix was badly hurt and totally lost it. He was screaming that the crown prince was back, just like Orca Cedes said. Originally, Nix and Ben were attacked, and then Freliev got blamed for treason. There was supposed to be a lot of time between those attacks, but the prince's revenge is happening way faster. Either way, the other folks at that picnic aren't going to be sleeping soundly anytime soon, and Kiana was hoping that Rodrigo would be the one tossing and turning all night. The picnic guests were Orca, Nix, Ben, Rodrigo, and King Enoch. They were all considered the crown prince's inner circle, and they're all blue bloods. While Kiana was pondering all this, standing next to her brother, the Marquis approached. He explained that everything was calm outside, and he'd come to escort the lady back to the duchy. Joshua noticed the Marquis's shawl was more expensive than his own, and Julius really liked his physique. But when he heard this guy was Kiana's lover, he started bad-mouthing him and trying to chase him away. The girl quickly clarified that this was the Marquis who owned the mine, and the squirrels started yelling that they needed to sign the contract first, and then the Marquis could get lost. Julius calmed down a little and declared that Kiana's lover should at least be a swordmaster, and Durham started begging the old man to stop dreaming and just take care of himself, and go back to his duchy because he looked totally wiped out. Just then, Kiana remembered she was supposed to meet Abian in the tulip room. That's exactly where the chandelier fell, and nobody's allowed in there now. Everyone else had already left, and the Marquis figured the captain would be no different. Caesar was back to suggesting they head back, promising to make sure everyone else got escorted too. Out of nowhere, Joshua declared they were all going back in the Freelian crew's carriage. The Marquis explained that the main gate was blocked, but offered them his carriage, which was waiting at the back entrance. It'd be easier for them to get out that way, especially since they had injured people. Without hesitating, Joshua agreed, realizing the Marquis was right. Right now, he couldn't even be mad at him, since the guy had thought everything through. In the carriage, Joshua helped Julius get settled so he wouldn't hurt his back again, and Kiana was signaling to him that they needed to think about the terms of their deal on the way. So, the carriage carrying the injured guy took off for the duchy. Lady Frelay was still hanging around with the Marquis, waiting for her grandpa to show. He was taking forever, so she figured he was still dealing with the Pervs people. That's when Caesar suggested they shouldn't stick around any longer and head back too. Lady Frelay thought about it for a few seconds and agreed to ride with the Marquis. Meanwhile, Prince Heaton was losing his mind with rage. He ordered his men to track down Old Man Meyer ASAP and find out where the artifact is hidden. After that, the prince went to see the injured captain of the first guard. The captain kept muttering that it was the crown prince and even mentioned they shared a secret. He was freaking out, remembering seeing the crown prince's silver hair in the moonlight. Heaton couldn't figure out how he'd shown up. They'd been combing every inch for 6 years. Nix hardly believed it, though, seeing as he'd been hitting the sauce pretty hard since the party started. Rodrigo even figured some grudge holder might be pulling a fast one, pretending to be the crown prince. Heaton wanted to believe that was it, but he had a bad feeling deep down. Now that the crown prince's name had come up twice, he needed to find that artifact ASAP. Just then, a servant showed up and announced that Meyer was finally talking, so Prince Heaton decided to go grill him himself. The second he heard about the goddess statue, He hauled ass to the docks. He was almost giddy, thinking his wish was finally about to come true. Plus, he'd gotten the instructions on how to crack the hidden compartment. He started praying that everything would go smoothly and he'd get the artifact. When he pressed the feather, a note tumbled out of the hiding place. Chiden was baffled, figuring the gods were messing with him. But the note that Talus gets actually contains the directions. He frantically unfolded the paper and started reading the text, which told some lowlife to get lost. The prince's bewilderment was off the charts. He couldn't believe this was a message from the gods. His body started to tremble, and he slowly began tearing the note, consumed by rage. But then he snapped, scattering the scraps of paper and screaming at the top of his lungs across the docks. Meanwhile, Kiana, on the road with the Marquise, was remembering the commotion. She couldn't believe the crown prince had returned, but hope flickered inside her. Caesar couldn't give her an answer and asked her to think about it herself. He couldn't exactly confess right then and there that he was the crown prince, could he? The girl started wondering if this really was the crown prince's revenge. If it was, she wanted Rodrigo to be last on the list, because he's the type you punish last, so he's eaten up with worry and doubt. The Marquise just remarked that the lady had thought it all through, like she knew how to torment people. Kiana suddenly admitted that she did have quite a bit of experience. Then Caesar asked how her foot was, the one the captain stepped on. The girl was surprised, since her fiancé hadn't even been nearby at the time. He confessed he'd seen everything from a distance, because she was his partner, so he was keeping an eye on things. Lady Frelai just snarked that he had amazing eyesight, and then she confessed she felt relieved when she saw the captain's leg all messed up. That's when she noticed the Marquis was staring at her a little too intensely, and he admitted that all this felt like some incredible dream. But then he explained it away, saying being back in the palace made him feel like a kid again. Suddenly, he wondered if Kiana had ever considered marrying someone from the royal family. The girl practically shrieked, "'Cause Prince Heaton is totally not her type." And the Marquis explained that the crown prince might still be kicking around. And if that's the case, Kiana would agree to become empress. But she added she wouldn't let him keep any concubines because she's crazy jealous. Only the emperor's allowed to have multiple concubines, and even that's not a given. And that's when the Marquis let slip that he'd definitely keep those things in mind. Then he wondered aloud what Kiana would change about the empress's situation. He promised to pass on her wishes, saying if she didn't like the empress, something must be wrong with the position itself. The girl got to thinking. These questions felt kind of weird to her, but she immediately said she couldn't even dream of that, because even the crown prince wasn't her type. Out of nowhere, he asked if she liked the Marquise, which totally threw Kiana for a loop. I mean, he's the complete opposite of the prince, inside and out. And Caesar wanted to know if a lady like her would be into a guy like that. Kiana said it would be perfect if you mixed them together. 50-50. Caesar found it weird to hear, but he just smiled. And that smile struck Lady Frelai as really strange and mysterious again. Then, she admitted she wanted to offer him another deal. She started talking about the Phoebel mine on his lands and proposed a contract. It'd be an exclusive contract with Frelai, and the Marquis promised to consider it. Kiana couldn't figure out why he wouldn't give a straight answer, even though he was smiling. And she immediately blurted out that it was way better than those shady loan schemes. She doesn't want him taking advantage of the less fortunate, but to work with people who have resources. The Marquis immediately reported that he wasn't involved in that kind of thing anymore. And then Lady Frelai decided to head to the Marquisate to do some research. She wants to work on some stuff, and also on what Caesar asked for earlier. But he can't exactly admit yet that the device is already finished. Plus, Kiana asked that we keep the device under wraps for now, so we don't stir up trouble too soon. She even suggested that the crown prince's son might show up. And that's when the Marquis practically yelled that His Highness doesn't have a son. He heard it from reliable sources himself. The prince definitely has no kids. Kiana suddenly guessed that the prince might have issues in that department, but promised to keep it quiet. Caesar looked at his companion, confused, not understanding why she was spouting this nonsense, and he insisted that His Highness is completely healthy in that regard. Then he didn't know where to look when Kiana asked how the Marquis knew all about it. He just wanted to disappear right then and there, but all he did was ask her to keep it a secret. Kiana wasn't letting it go. She was curious why the prince wasn't showing up in person. I mean, he could just waltz in and off with the heads of everyone at that little party. The Marquis just said she didn't have a knack for politics. Then he explained that if His Highness just showed up and rounded everyone up, all those involved would just smirk and say the prince was talking total nonsense, and the issue would be decided like everything else, at the Imperial Assembly, where everyone could argue for the crown prince to step down. The imperial family needs to shore up its authority, and that takes two things. First, the support of the top-tier aristocrats, and second, military might. Without that, even if the prince comes back, it'll all happen again. And Prince Heaton and his mother? They've got both. House Pervez and the guard back them, though it'll be tougher without Nyx now. So, the Marquis declared the crown prince started off right, and his return is close. Kiana suddenly realized Caesar knows way too much about Ed's business. But looking at his face, you can tell he knows even more than Joshua does. And she asked the Marquise to let her know right away if any news about the crown prince pops up. Suddenly, the carriage lurched hard, hitting a bump. Kiana lost her balance and went flying across the carriage. But Caesar caught her just in time so she wouldn't get hurt. And she could feel him holding her tight, like he didn't want her to fall. Just then, the driver's voice piped up, apologizing for the bumpy ride. But Kiana could hear the Marquise's heartbeat even louder. She looked up and saw Caesar staring at her, looking worried. Suddenly, an even louder noise came from outside, like something had exploded. But it was just fireworks, and Kiana and the Marquise decided to enjoy the show. Caesar even suggested it might be a way of announcing His Highness. These fireworks are in honor of the Crown Prince's 17th birthday. Rumor has it he planned them himself, to show someone special, but he kept it under wraps from them, because he figured watching from afar would be way more satisfying. Caesar said with a hint of sarcasm that the celebration was ready, but the prince himself was nowhere to be found. And Hitov took advantage of all the chaos to really stir things up today. He's practically saying that if the emperor and crown prince don't step in, this world is his for the taking. Meanwhile, Prince Heighton was having a total meltdown down at the docks. He watched the fireworks explode, and it felt like it would never end. As Kiana watched the fireworks, she suddenly wondered if they weren't actually for the crown prince. He wouldn't be happy about that, but the Marquise didn't agree with her. Then, he brushed a strand of hair from her face, saying that it was beautiful. He meant the fireworks, which were reflecting beautifully in the lady's eyes. He was enjoying the moment so much, it almost took his breath away. Kiana was totally thrown, thinking Caesar was just trying to get into her pants. She started having trouble breathing and felt super awkward. She looked away, but could still feel his eyes burning into her. But she'd already decided this pretty boy trash wasn't for her. Suddenly, the Marquis started talking all science-y, explaining about the carbon dioxide in the carriage. Kiana was a mess. Her heart was pounding, and her face was bright red. Then the fireworks started again, and without even thinking, she buried her face in his vest. Caesar decided not to ruin the moment and just held her closer. The girl reminded him not to try so hard, since they weren't a real couple, and that they just had a business arrangement and nothing more. But the Marquise just brushed it off as a dream again, so he went along with it. That's when Kiana got worried about him, explaining that the problem was his visits to the palace. She said the palace was giving him hallucinations, and she begged him to stay at the estate. She even suggested he get checked out, for his mental well-being. After that, she asked Caesar to let her go, but her words hit him so hard he just tuned her out.